and you're party to what the survey says, they've told you what the survey, they've given you the survey.
Yes.
And part of what is your land we're using,
yes.
effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. So the survey, our block's 764 square metres, 15.24 by 50.2 metres long. And the front corner of our block is where the street comes around. If you're coming along Laurel and sweeping onto Weems, that corner there has actually been taken. There's a white dot. If you come past, feel free to come and drive on the street. Come and knock on our door, I'll show you as well. There's a white spot out on the street, which is where our block's actually meant to extend to.
Right.
So our front fence comes along and then starts again, but if you kept extending it along, you'd end up on the road itself.
Right. Yeah. Strange enough, I have spent a bit of time up there lately.
Yeah.
I didn't notice the white dot, but Harvey did mention it the other day. Thank you.
Norris.
Councillor Hubel.
Thanks, Simon, for coming in. I jumped in at the same time as Councillor Piggott, and just wanted to thank you for coming in. I particularly wanted to, look, I had a few questions that were developing in my mind as you were speaking, and then you ended up actually addressing them all, so thank you. I'm interested in hearing your perspective about the increased traffic and use that happens on Old Coles home games. Could you just tell us a little bit about that and how that affects
Yeah, so
like
on our side of the street, there's no parking allowed all the way up to Hood. On the other side of the street, about halfway down, you're allowed to park. So on the eastern side of Laurel Avenue, you're allowed to park about halfway down all the way up to Hood. But then the Maid Road itself, no parking. Obviously the gravel car park where the council vehicles park up to use the nursery is parking, and that's where people park as well. But yes, you do find people obviously parking on the Maid Road when they're not meant to. It's all yellow lines, no parking signs and everything, but they do park a little bit. But in saying that, with the new car park that's gone up on Tamarack, as well as the overflow car park with the gravel bit, we don't really see it too much. No one's parked out in front of our house, and you wouldn't want to anyway, because if you were parking up there and someone coming around the corner, they're just going to hit your cars. So yeah. So no, it's not too bad. And look, that's something else, I suppose, that I would have thought that if we did take the street away, you'd actually probably create more car parking opportunities for people to actually access the community garden, Rose Garden and Rugby Oval, because if you actually set those areas up correctly, you could then park at the front of our house because there's no issues with coming around a corner and actually hitting a car. So you probably actually end up with 10 plus car parks down our western side of Laurel Avenue, as well as another 5 on the other side of the eastern side of Laurel, and then wherever on Weems Street. And if you'd maintain that small gravel space out the front or whatever for the community garden as well. So yeah, I would have thought it'd be actually better if we did take the road away.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thanks very much for coming along tonight. My query relates to your title when you bought the land. Does that reflect this anomaly, or is
No, it doesn't. No, not at all. No, so our title is a rectangle and it states 764 square metres. Yeah, so, yeah. And so when we bought it, we were in the thought that it was that size, but it's not. We can't, well, so we could extend our fence out to the edge of our block, but it'd be on the road. And so that might cause a few problems. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Councillor Jones.
Simon, thank you for coming. So I just want to talk about the legality of that encroachment. Does that mean you could legally tell the council to get off your land? And they'd have to redesign the road?
I would love to know the answer to that, Harvey. If you could tell me, it'd be good. Because...
No.
Because, yeah, look, I mean, we obviously don't want to start a fight with council or anything. Like, we just want to make sure that we're getting full access to the block.
I'm just thinking that if you did have your block reinstated, that road would then become even worse. It'd be like a hairpin.
Yeah, you'd have to turn it into a single lane, like narrow throat through there, because you wouldn't have access to 2 lanes the way it was.
And have you talked to your neighbours at all? You know,
so,
you know, are the neighbours saying, "Oh no, we've got to keep the road"?
No. I would say that most of us are in agreement that we want to remove it. I think everyone would be pretty happy to not have the road there, because look, the access into the oval and into that rose garden would be significantly improved, and the ability for us to then walk through to the oval and up past the oval and all around the place, and encouraging people to actually get out and walk safely with kids or as an older person or as an adult or whatever, it would be much better. Yeah, and everyone we've spoken to, and there's, as you guys, I'm assuming you're all aware, we've got quite a strong community on Laurel Avenue and Weem Street, and everyone is, very keen to have the road reinstated as community space.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Cornish.
Just like to thank you for the use of your land for community. It might be going on for a little bit longer, and I thank you for that too, but thank you for making us aware of it.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, Mr Flint.
great. No worries. Thanks, everyone.
And now we have Mr Stephen Allison, and I know that you're aware of the procedure, Stephen. And Mrs Allison, I've forgotten your first name. Thank you.
There we go. We actually understand what prompted us coming along tonight was item 10.1 and the debate that was going to ensue about that, and so we thought it might be timely to attend tonight. However, we understand informally that it might have been withdrawn, but nevertheless, all of the issues will still be discussed within the context of Tregenza Oval. So, I guess the context I'd like to set briefly is the situation in Linden Park. I think probably quite a few people are aware of the situation, partly because of the council information session where a number of councillors were on the weekend. But basically more and more residents have smaller blocks with minimal gardens, and there is we feel a greater need for the social and environmental benefits of community gardens. There's no, if we look at the map that's provided in the report, there's no nearby community garden. There is a closed garden across town in McGill, but nothing nearby. We have twice the percentage of semi-detached dwellings compared to the South Australian average. This trend would accelerate under the South Australian Government Planning Code, where we'd have row houses on 200 square metre blocks, which is proposed for our suburb. At last Saturday's council information session, I'd say that feelings ran pretty high about the effects of urban infill on quality of life, streetscapes, and trees and gardens in Burnside. In fact, I think I heard lifelong Liberal voters declaring they'd vote against the government based on this single issue, which is fairly remarkable. Under its historic and current use, the nursery site is actually a green open space already that helps offset the combined effects of climate change and, of course, increased urban infill that are two influences working together to increase nighttime temperatures within the city of Burnside. The nursery site it grows trees, shrubs, plants. Probably, I don't think it was mentioned in the report, but the prevailing wind from the hills, the gully breezes, they go across Tregenza Oval into the nursery site and into the suburb of Linden Park. More and more birds are coming to the city. I'm not quite sure what that might be. It's possibly not a good sign, but they love the oval, they love the nursery site. In terms of the council's larger agenda, I guess the nursery site is a perfect example of the council prioritising the environment. I think residents were heartened in September 2019 when the council recognised the climate emergency. That was noted. I think the Mayor commended Councillor Hubel for the proposal and indicated that climate change needs to be considered holistically in all the decisions and operations of Council, and certainly preserving and revitalising the nursery site is a great example of this. In more concrete terms, I think the BRM Advisory Report and Council's Strategic Projects and Planning Overview provides a good basis for community consultation. It's good reading, it's obviously independent, it's comprehensible, It's high quality. It was, I guess, commissioned at considerable expense following the workshops that the public were allowed to attend and council discussions, which shortlisted the preferred options. We realise that the exact use of the nursery is up for debate and that there are a range of views, but the fundamental issue for all of us is just how best to revitalise a green open space for current and future generations to enjoy. We're not seeking to form a private club of 41 individuals who monopolise it. We want to find the best way that that space could be used. And we feel there is great value in consulting with the community on contested issues like the future of the garden. I think I'll end my talk there. I guess just a very brief comment about Tregenza Oval, which is that it's a much valued resource. We feel it's quite well managed, and that we look forward to the future strategic planning of the site. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jones.
Stephen, just want to say thank you for coming.
Sorry.
Thank you for coming. We're obviously talking a bit about the general use of Tregenza Oval later on tonight. How do the neighbours and the rugby club interact in practice? I mean, you've lived there for a few years.
This again, the rugby club's a vibrant part of the community. The main interaction we'd have with the club would be during the winter months. We don't see much of them in summer. There are fortnightly big games, which are the A-grade games, and the rugby crowd's a good crowd. As Simon was saying, they'll park down the streets, but they're an orderly and happy bunch. We go and watch the games. We enjoy the games. In terms of what the community's saying, there are some concerns about the expansion of the club rooms. And I think it's possibly just a lack of knowledge. People don't seem to know even how big, no doubt it's online, but how big it's going to be, whether there'll be any extra noise, any extra traffic, any influences of that nature. But I sense it's a lack of information rather than a sort of undertow of concern, if I could put it that way.
Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for coming along tonight. If there is a master plan developed or a management plan for this whole area, do you see the Laurel Avenue site as being totally separate from the Tregenza Oval site, or could they all be blended together in one master plan for that whole area?
I'd like to see the issue kept completely separate myself. The nursery has always had a separate identity. It's been a great green space, even though it's an industrial space as well. The community has always valued the space. It's now has the chance to be opened up and revitalised. I think the issues around the rugby club that will come up will be the kind of vague concerns that I mentioned. They'll have to do with why isn't there cricket in summer? Why was there that noise last night? How big are the club rooms going to be? I don't see those as necessarily the same issues that we're going to look for when we're trying to design a community garden for the community.
And just a follow-up question, what actually happened to the cricket? Because I didn't know that the cricket wasn't there any longer.
I've only seen in the paper, I think the cricket club wasn't able to play. I read news articles, but perhaps others would know the background for sure. We would like to see cricket on the Oval.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you. Thank you also for coming in. I wanted to ask you about, since we're talking about Tregenza Oval itself, ask about the sorts of users of that oval that you see Obviously, we've got the rugby club and they're playing rugby, but what other sorts of users, do you notice up there?
It is a popular venue. Probably the greatest number of users would be, regular users would be dog walkers. So dog lovers are up there every day at all hours. You can go to the Oval pretty early and they'll be exercising their dogs. It's actually, funnily enough, a great multicultural space. The Indian community and the Chinese community are often there, families. They'll either playing cricket at the nets or they're just there as family groups. So it's actually, in my view, a pretty good space. Kids play footy, kids play cricket, families gather. So it's an informal space when it's not being used for rugby.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else wishing to ask questions, so thank you very much, Stephen and Judy. Now, our third deputation is Dr. Rebecca Jeans, who is to talk to us about dog and cat management. Again, if you'd just like to give us your suburb, that would be fine. Name and
Good
suburb.
evening, Mayor and elected members. I'm Rebecca Jeans. I live at Hazelwood Park. I wish to address the recurring issue of dog and cat management in our parks. Last October, I emailed all members of council about this issue. Disappointingly, despite assurances I would be advised when this matter was to come to discussion, I was not, and have had little time to prepare my deputation since finding out this afternoon. Last year, the council survey was conducted only months after the much larger and comprehensive Dog and Cat Management Board survey, when the consensus from Burnside residents was to retain the status quo of dogs off lead in our parks. I've had a brief look at the responses to the council survey, and my first observation would be there was quite a low number of respondents, and therefore I'm not sure how significant it is compared to that much bigger survey. It raises again to me the issue of how these surveys are publicised. A lot of people are unaware. A lot of people thought the issue had been put to bed by the earlier well-publicised survey. I'd also be interested to know how results are collated and indeed scrutinised, as I'm pretty sure that I know more than 39 dog owners who were in favour of retaining the status quo at the time of that second survey. I'm a local GP and I've previously spoken here of the benefits of dog ownership. This is not pie in the sky stuff, but real validated research that shows positive benefits to physical and psychological health of dog owners. I want to see people get moving and keep moving, and a lot of benefit is derived from walking out with your dog, with both of you able to free range. Obviously exercise and socialising, but real and lasting friendships grow in our parks as well. Particularly for our older residents, walking dogs on lead can become difficult or even impossible as mobility and balance become impaired, and it's a great benefit for them to be able to just attend their local park and potter with their dog. Dog parks aren't suitable for many dogs. Mine was attacked on 2 occasions at Conningham Street, and after the second episode we were both too scared to return. I am in principle in favour of dogs on leads near organised sport and playgrounds. I think a 20-metre limit is excessive and would drive a lot of people in the smaller parks onto the roads or right out, because if you look at a park like Wood Park, you'd be on the road. So in the survey, we were only given a choice of a 20-metre exclusion zone or not on lead at all. And I think a 10-metre choice would have been much more appropriate and allowed me to make a choice of 10 metres rather than not on lead at all. I think a lot of these surveys are constructed in a way that's unreasonable or leading. Consider fencing some of the smaller playgrounds, like's been done at Miller Reserve, I think, and the Tusmore wading pool, and not for reasons pertaining to dogs, but for other reasons. It would be a good idea if the council stopped the practice of doing up a play area, removing the peripheral rubbish bin so that every time you want to dispose of your dog poo, you have to enter the play area. This has happened over the years at Wood Park, Miller Reserve, and more recently at Tregenza Oval. In summary, I think while the lead rules can be tweaked in specific circumstances, there are good reasons to allow people access to walk their dogs off leads in our parks. And if you reflect back at the bigger dog and cat management plan, the numbers there in Burnside were very much in favour of retaining that status quo. With increasing urban infill, yards are shrinking or disappearing. Dogs also need to run, retrieve or meet other dogs off lead for their own health. And I, like many other people, need my dog for mine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Carbone.
Rebecca, thanks for coming in. I can assure you that we are definitely on the same page when it comes to this matter.
I think I know Charlie.
Yeah. Yes. So, and in fact, keeping our parks and reserves leash-free was part of my action plan that I took to the last council elections. So, so I can assure you we are on the same page there. But given all that, which I know you talked about reducing it from 20 metres to 10 metres around playgrounds.
And there seems to be a big emphasis on the wading pool in that. As I said, I've only had a really quick look at the stuff tonight because I finished work and had to put this together.
So your concerns were around playgrounds, the wading pool and the sporting ovals?
No, but everyone seems to think there's special rules about the wading pool at Tusmore Park. Why is that not just treated like a playground? I think 20 metres is a long way. If you go to, and I go to lots of parks, and if you go to them regularly and work out where you'd be, as I said, walking on the road at Wood Park. I don't let my dog off the lead there anyway, but there are people who do. And you'd have your dog on and off and on and off the lead as you walk around a park, whereas 10 metres seems ample to me. Sport games is no-brainer. I think if there's an organised sport game going on, dogs should be put on leads.
So your concerns are only about the wading pool and the playgrounds?
Just
not
about,
the sporting
and the
ovals?
limit, the limit.
Yep.
And the option to fence more of them, but not really because I think dogs are going to go in there and rip the kids up. I think there are other reasons for fencing playgrounds. I noticed the one at Tregenza Oval has been fenced. I presume that's because it's close to the road.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks for coming along, Rebecca, and letting us know your thoughts. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Carbone. My sentiments are exactly the same, and I just wanted to clarify about your concerns about the wading pool and any differential treatment about that.
It looked as if you were treating the wading pool as something special with a broader exclusion zone, and I'm not sure why.
Thanks. We'll have a look at that and clarify that. The other issue that you raised that I wasn't aware of is the waste bins.
Yeah, you see, I'll keep my eyes on the rubbish bins.
Absolutely. Well, they're very important, and we're hoping to have
what it means is
compostable dog poo bags.
The kids are playing, which is nice when it's 40 degrees, and you actually have to take your dog to the playground.
You're absolutely right. So thanks very much for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Okay, thank you.
Jeans, for coming in.
Pleasure.
There are no petitions, and I did ask if there are any questions, but I don't believe there are any questions for public question. Questions on notice. We don't have any questions on, but we do have motions on notice, and the first one is 10.1. That is Councillor Piggott.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, it is my intention, with your permission, was to rescind the rescission motion, if I could. In actual fact, what I wanted to achieve didn't need the rescission motion, and I clearly have upset some locals, and so that was unfortunate. But what I would like to do, though, is run the motion on notice slightly changed, and I think that's coming up. And the purpose of this motion really is that I feel the various discussions we've had has been very focused on 31 Laurel Avenue, and in actual fact it does dovetail into Tregenza Oval. And it really, I guess Councillor Jones tripped me over this a little bit when he mentioned about the concept of pulling of reclaiming the made road, or roads, full stop. And it's interesting, we've had a delegation this morning, or deputation tonight, that actually is in favour of that. I thought perhaps taking a road away where it was might be controversial, and it still might be, but really what this motion seeks to do is, in parallel with the work that we asked for last time in regard to the community garden, I think we should look at the whole site in terms of what might go into a master plan. We don't have a master plan, and perhaps we should, but that's for a later day. What I'm after is a report, and what this motion requests is a report that looks at the whole place. And it's actually quite an interesting place. It does operate quite well for old collegians, I think, as a rugby field. We do have 31 Laurel Avenue at one end. We've got two made roads, which are on our land. We could take back and put in as purely public space. On one end is a person doing a deputation tonight. At the other end is a senior citizens home, so a Regis home, which dovetails straight onto that. So that, I think, provides complications and opportunities, probably. So what this motion really asks for is to do the work on the made roads, and the previous motion asked for traffic surveys and the background of it. I'd like to know then, based on that, what things we could do with those made roads, maybe leave them. Whatever we do, I think the concept of a community garden, and a community garden that's accessible beyond a limited number of members, I think is clearly something that council supports to do in Linden Park, and I accept that. I don't accept necessarily the right place to do it is on 31 Laurel Avenue, but I think any work does need to have that as a clear intention that council's been very clear on in regard to a community garden. Old collegians are a major user of that. They've been in the news lately. They've clearly got plans of their own. I'd like to understand as a council what they perhaps see for the site. And then a catch-all at the bottom, the opportunities and avenues to increase community use. We've heard that it is used by the community. I read today that people use it for boomerang throwing. Andrew Hillier's email to us all talked about boomerang throwing. So clearly it is used, and I'm not suggesting it's not, but if you look at it, there's actually a number of spaces in that area that do appear to be underutilised or perhaps slightly unloved. So I think it is worth a look at the whole site. I don't know who put these maps on here, but I do think it is a reasonable thing that instead of just focusing on this bit and not actually even looking at this bit, which we didn't, it does make sense in parallel to look at the whole lot and see what as a whole we can do as a council to the benefit of Linden Park. So that's that's a motion which I think council should be able to support if I take away the emotion of getting in the way of the community garden, which I don't believe it does. I think we continue to do what we always were intending based on the previous motion. I'd just like to see this work done at the same time, and so that we can actually look at the whole project and maybe commit to doing all sorts of things in there, including closing roads potentially. So I seek your support.
Councillor Hubel, you wish to second it?
I'm happy to second this. Yeah, look, I think this, takes things a bit further than it had before. I do like the idea of a holistic approach over a narrow-minded one in principle. So I think looking at the site, thinking about what could be possible with what is really quite a large space in the middle of suburbia and is really heavily used only in the winter months. I think there are a lot more opportunities that may present themselves, so I'm very happy to be looking further into this.
Councillor Davey?
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a question. I understand this, it sounds like a perfectly reasonable motion. I'm just worried about all the other aspects that are already ongoing in relation to this area. We've got our community consultation motion underway already, I believe, on Laurel Avenue. So I assume that's underway and starting to be processed. And I believe there's also another report coming to us on Tregenza Oval and possible uses. So I just wonder what's in the pipeline and how they're all coalescing together to manage the whole site.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll just ask Mr. Cant to address that one. Through your worship, this motion will work alongside the previously endorsed motion, which looked at community consultation on the community garden option that was considered last time, and also to consider consultation on the Maid Road elements of the site as well. We would intend bringing this all back into one report, considering all the different elements that are asked to be considered, so council can consider that holistically. Separately to that, and which was subject to recent media, we've been made aware of the rugby club. They've received a federal grant to assist with their redevelopment on the site. We presently have some information from them. They have requested council to consider whether there may be an opportunity for financial support with that. We have gone back with a few more questions, particularly in light of the recent media. We want to make sure we've got all of the information together. We can present that to council, and we'll be looking to present that within the either next meeting or the meeting after. That's not dependent on a further master plan approach, though. That can continue separate to that process, and they're keen to get moving on a redevelopment of that site.
Councillor Jones?
Have I got the... I pressed it in line, I thought. Anyway.
Okay, there you go.
Councillor Jones?
Thank you. I think this is a good motion and I'm happy to support it. I've had the benefit of having discussions with the rugby club, as has Councillor Hubel, and I think their plans for the site are really exciting, and their plans for increasing community use of the clubhouse are really exciting. Probably not many people know that they've actually got an open licence, which not many sporting clubs have. I think there's about 5 in the state, as you know. Burnside's only got one pub for 45,000 people, doubling the number of pubs in Burnside. What a fantastic result that would be. And I can walk to the Feathers and the rugby club. I mean, it's just perfect. I mean, what could be better? So I'm very happy to support Councillor Piggott's motion.
Councillor Dawes?
Thank you, Worship. Just a query here. This was a motion on notice from, I just want to get it clarified. I'm happy to discuss this motion, but I'm just seeking from administration or from the Mayor as to whether this can be discussed tonight. Because I know in Councillor Pickett's email to us at 6 a.m. this morning, he said it was slightly modified. And when I'm checking what he has put forward to what was in the agenda, there seems to be quite a change. So I'm happy to discuss it, provided we can. That's the query.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Certainly in light of the way procedurally this has happened, Council is more than able to consider what has been moved by Councillor Piggott. There is nothing restraining in considering that, even in light of the fact that previously it was intimated it might be worded slightly different. What is important is what has been moved by Councillor Piggott at this point in time. So the answer is yes, we can consider it.
So I can rescind a motion, say I put a motion to rescind and I want to change it, I can therefore put it forward. That's a query I have for the future.
Through Madam Mayor, I think it's important to note that it's only an intention to rescind. So Councillor Piggott was signalling his intention. So it was fully within Councillor Piggott's power to pull that off the table. He was simply complying with the requirement to give a certain amount of notice of his intentions to rescind. So he is certainly able to do what has occurred this evening.
Okay, thank you for that.
So in terms of a precedent, it's not a precedent, but it is possible in the future for anyone else to do it in the same way. I think that was the intent of your question. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Apologies for before, but I just pressed my button when I was asking the question, so... Obviously. Again, I had another question. Just to clarify, because I'm a bit confused about I wasn't here at the debate last meeting, so I just want to make sure that, I mean, this sounds a very common sense motion to me, but that this won't delay or impact negatively on the resolution that was moved last time.
Through Madam Mayor. No, certainly we've discussed this amongst officers, and we understand the intent here is to complement the original motion, and we like the fact that it's talking about bringing together one single report rather than dealing with it in a disjointed manner. And so in that context, we are comfortable we can work with this resolution and get a good outcome.
And a follow-up question. Because I'm not at all convinced about road closures and that aspect of the motion. Does that mean that the whole report on the community garden will hinge on and it will all come together to us for consideration? That's what I'm not clear about.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My understanding is that each element will be dealt with in its own right, and we're dealt with ostensibly equal importance. Nothing will take precedence over the other. This is about exploring, in my mind, what is there, all the potential future uses for this site. Council has made it very clear that up front, one of the clear things they'd like to understand is around the potential use for a community garden. So that's, we have that very paramount in our minds. And again, I think this is simply clarifying that in any master planning process, we want to make sure we understand that we're not solely focused on one potential use, but looking to explore multiple uses. So we are very clear on that.
And one final question. Are these all community title land? They're all community land. Thanks.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. The question for the administration is, what is the cost of this master plan estimate budget, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. At this stage, we're looking to develop this in-house. So the consultation and the master plan are looking to be developed in-house. So the cost will be simply the cost of administration wages. We're not looking at external consultants to produce this document at this stage.
And just to clarify, master plans generally happen when there's conflicts and proposals coming from a variety of different parties. Have we clarified any proposals, official proposals, or are we asking for proposals?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Very clear at this point in time that this is a blank canvas. We haven't had any formal proposals. Obviously, the concept of a community garden has been explored, no doubt. But in terms of other avenues that are being explored here this evening, we haven't been formally approached in any manner. Again, we're taking on face value this is a genuine exploration of alternatives, and that's what the community consultation will bear out.
Thank you.
Councillor Piggott.
Just following up on Councillor Henschke, can I just clarify the intention of this motion is not to produce a master plan? Is that fair to say? It's to produce, it's to do some preliminary work which might inform a future master plan if we choose to do one. Is that your understanding? Yep, thanks.
Councillor Piggott, if you would like to sum up now.
Look, thanks. Thanks for the input. Look, it was a bit of a rush of blood, the rescission. I concede that. I did feel last time, though, that we were very focused on the 31 Laurel Avenue. What we did with the triangular piece of land, which is on the corner north of the road, was dismissed away as we'd sort that out later, and the Made Road thing came up as well. So I did feel that we had sorted out the 31 Laurel Avenue, but we left everything else in the lap of the gods. And when you do walk around Tregenza, you know, I think it does seem to be operating, there's no crisis, but we do have an opportunity, I think, to pick up a number of things here if we get this work done. And another one walked in tonight when we had a person with a deputation, the fact that we seem to, on the face of it, have some of his land, and he certainly lives on a dangerous corner. So there's a number of things in this that I think, you know, this report will provide. And so I think it's worthy of us doing it in parallel with the community garden work.
Thanks. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Right, and we now move to 10.2, retrieval of motion on the table. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to retrieve the motion for discussion. We put this on the table because can I speak first? Yeah. We put this on the motion. We put this motion on the table because the consensus at the time was it was premature and maybe the wording could have been better. So what I am going to propose, because we've now got the public environment report has been published as the Minister requested, I am going to put an alternative motion, which I think you have, Rob, but I'll read it out. So I'm going to propose that Council send a representative or representatives to a public information session on the public environment report which has been released in respect to a proposed helicopter landing facility at Kensington Park being facilitated by the Department of Planning, Transport and Infrastructure as advertised online and through the public notice section of the Messenger dated 12 February 2020, and 2, be presented with a report following this briefing and in advance of the public submission closure date 13th March 2020 with respect to any matter raised and in order to inform any future actions of Council. I'll speak briefly. I mean, I'm generally in favour of community consultation. We're doing community consultation on Laurel Avenue. Here we have an opportunity where someone is doing community consultation to us when we're the community. So I think it's incumbent on us to participate in that community consultation. The existing motion is premature. Let's go and hear what's said at the meeting. I mean, I've read the report. Let's go to the consultation. From that, the administration can generate a considered report that we can discuss at our next meeting, I think, which would be the 25th of February. And then that gives us a chance to discuss it, and we can give a considered response in time by the response time of 13th of March of this year. And that's it, really. So that's what I'm proposing, and I hope I will find a seconder.
Madam Mayor, if I may just jump in before we proceed any further. It's a two-stage process. So procedurally, we do require a mover and a seconder for the motion, which is to take this off the table. Right. It sounds like a bit double handling, but so we've got to bring that off the table. So in seeking your seconder, your first order of business is to pull it off the table. Yep. So we'll be looking for a seconder simply for the procedural matter. Okay.
So you're willing to take it off the table, to move to take it off the table? Yes. Yep. And seconded by Councillor Hugh? Okay, Councillor Davey to second it to be taken off the table, and we have to vote on that first.
That's correct.
So those of you in favour motion is passed. So now... So, no, now we...
No, you need to deal with the motion that was adjourned by the movement off the table, that's on the table. Because debate recommences.
So we can recommence where councillor Jones finished.
Yes, certainly my view is that we can recommence effectively, and I'm suggesting that with the new material that's come to light, what's in front of us essentially lapses and gets replaced by what
Yes.
Councillor Jones wants to make it move.
Right. So, does he need to read that again? No. Thank you. Yes. So now, but now I'm seeking a seconder for this one.
The way we'll be handling this matter
This is a new one.
is Councillor Jones has made it very clear that since this was laid on the table, events and circumstances have moved on, and it's more than appropriate, as if we were at that previous meeting, for Councillor Jones to say, I no longer wish to move what is there. I'm replacing it with the two motions that are before you this evening, and that's what I would like you to vote on.
Yes. So now we're seeking a seconder for this motion.
A mover and a seconder.
So a mover and a seconder.
Yes.
Can't hear me.
Councillor Jones wishes to move this motion that's now on the screen in yellow, and seconded by Councillor Hughes. Councillor Hughes, do you wish to speak now or later?
Speak. Councillor Jones has already spoken, or is he going to speak again? You've made your point. I will speak briefly. I think that it's worthwhile getting as much information as we can to make an informed decision, so I will be supporting Councillor Jones's motion.
Councillor Lemon.
I have a question. Can administration, if I may, can administration tell me whether we are in any way supporting our neighbour council Norwood in their quest to not have a helicopter landing on the corner of Portrush and Norwood Parade? Are we actively supporting them in this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it's premature to publicly talk about whether we are supporting or not supporting, but certainly as part of this process, I've got no doubt we'll be having conversations to work out the appropriate approach there.
Councillor Cornish.
I'm just hoping the mover and seconder might remove Park. Oh, it looks like it's being done because it's actually in Kensington, not in Kensington Park. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, that your response has actually given me another question. If what I've just said is premature, why are we looking at this? Why are we looking at helicopter landing sites?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When I said premature, I mean purely in light of the fact that I really believe we should attend the public information session before we form an opinion. That's the only reason I answered in perhaps not as firm as way as I normally do. But,
well, I think
so really, I'm very clear that this is about us fully informing ourselves and then forming an opinion on it.
Right, I don't have anyone else on the screen, so Councillor Jones, do you wish to sum up or take it straight to vote? Right. Okay. Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against, motion is carried. No questions without notice, or are there? Yes?
I do have a question without notice. Thank you, Madam Mayor. At the last meeting, I did bring up a topic about regenerating the Adelaide Hills after the fires with trees, and I was just wondering if the administration might have a bit of an update on how that project is going.
Mr. Harvey.
Through the Mayor. So since the fires at Cuddly Creek and Kangaroo Island, the Council has in various forms been assisting through the local government functional support group, mainly. We've been providing personnel support into the incident management teams that have been running in those two locations, assisting other councils, alongside a number of other councils, and also on KI as well. And then up in Cuddly Creek, we also provided resources in for tree management work almost immediately after the event, again coordinated by the functional service group. Since then, the support that has been needed by particularly Adelaide Hills Council and Mount Barker has dropped off. They have themselves been working hard to work with their communities and now entered a recovery phase. That's a long process for many people, and that may take years to actually get through. So it's still very early days in terms of that process, and they're still trying to find their feet in terms of the community and do immediate work to, I suppose, secure property and to also bring some normality back into the lives of those people. The revegetation of areas is something that we have been speaking to organisations that are placed to help, and they are state organisations like Trees for Life, and they are giving us the same information that it's very early days in terms of revegetation. The focus is actually on human recovery in the first instance and trying to get that sorted out, and then they'll move on to the vegetation, some of which will even in a very short space of time have started to recover ever so slightly, and will continue to do so. So we're not planning at this particular point to do anything major in that space. We will work with those people that are providing the primary support, whether that's a department, a state department, or whether it's a not-for-profit like Trees for Life. However, in talking to Trees for Life, they have indicated that initially they're looking for cash or donations and support, as a lot of those organisations are doing. They would love our help in terms of providing promotion, so piggyback promotion for the work that they're doing, getting messages out that they were trying to get out to the community, given that we have that ability to share information with a wide number of people. And they've been asking other councils to do the same thing. And just very initially, and this again wouldn't happen for some time, is to actually have our biodiversity nursery support them in providing winter stock, which is something that they can't necessarily provide through their home growers and through their networks. But that, again, that's very initial conversations and something that may not occur for a year or so, but certainly within the remit of and the scope and the resources we have available. That's pretty much where we are at the moment, but we're keeping a very close eye on and for very close contact with the councils that are involved, and also the organisations that we work with who are heavily connected to the recovery efforts that are up there at the moment. What I'd love to do is to provide you all with an information document that gives more information on that, what we have done and effectively what we're doing at the moment and what we'll keep looking out for in terms of supporting those communities. And the message is there that we provide support that they need, and essentially they'll tell us what they need, and we'll work with them from there.
Thank you very much. And I might point out that today I received a very nice letter from the Mayor of Mount Barker, Anne Ferguson, thanking our staff and our community for all the support that we have given the City of Mount Barker in the work that has happened since the bushfires. So I will be putting that on the agenda for our next meeting, but I only got it today. But I'd wanted to take the opportunity while the staff are here for them to hear me personally thank on behalf of the Mayor of Mount Barker. They really do sincerely appreciate all the support that our council has provided up until this time, and I know will be continuing to. So thank you, Mr. Harvey. Don't have any motions. And now we do have a presentation from the Commissioner for Small Business in South Australia, Mr. John Chapman. So, Mr. Chapman, could you please come forward and I think you know how to use a microphone, so I will let you talk to us, and I'm assuming any questions at the end? Okay.
Yes, I think I've got it on. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to present and talk about the work that I do, the Small Business Commissioner, supporting small businesses throughout South Australia. I liken myself to being a shopkeeper. I've got a shop in Gawler Place there, where we've got a whole lot of information available for small business. So we're a first-stop shop, not a one-stop shop, where we help businesses with queries that they have. My minister, we transferred ministerial accountability to the Attorney-General back on 1 July last year, and it's the Attorney-General and Deputy Premier, and of course the member for Bragg, so I'm sure Vicky Chapman is familiar to many of you around the table. That's my team, a small team dedicated to helping small business in a whole range of areas, which I'll talk through now. One of our main functions is alternative dispute resolution, working with businesses to resolve disputes with other businesses, local government and indeed state government. It's a very, very broad remit. Ultimately, a person or a business comes to us with an issue. We then go to the other party and get their version of events and then try and map a solution between the parties. Generally, it's a voluntary process. I do have powers in a number of areas where I can actually compel people to undertake mediation, but we don't like using those powers if we can avoid it, because ideally we want a voluntary outcome where people agree and can move on and hopefully keep the relationship, indeed, with another business if necessary. We deal with about 3,400 inquiries a year. Of those, about 240 to 260 will go to formal cases. Some are relatively easy to resolve. Some take a long time. The longest I've had was nearly 4 years. It had a whole range of issues in terms of a bank, a lease, arguments between the lessee and obviously the mortgagee. There was an insolvency mixed in there, and we had EPA issues and also some zoning issues with the particular council. But we kept at it, and ultimately we got an outcome where a small business in the northern suburbs in a manufacturing area, basically employing 5 people, could continue on, and they were facing being evicted when they came to us. My role is created under the Small Business Commissioner Act, but I'm responsible for either all or parts of a number of acts there up on the screen. One of particular interest might be the Local Government Act, which I'm sure is familiar to the councillors and indeed the staff, and mobile food vendors. I now have some responsibilities that were put in there by the Parliament back in 2017 to deal with disputes involving food vendors and bricks and mortar businesses, sometimes other food vendors. Generally, with local government in these cases, local government sets location rules, and the Act seeks me to actually work through disputes. Now, I'm pleased to say in the last summer period, we haven't had any disputes in this area, so it seems to be working particularly well. Retail commercial leases, very, very big part of our business. About 40% of our work comes from that area. So that's shops, people in commercial premises with leases, and there's a whole range of issues that arise there, and I'm responsible for that act. Building industry, the Security Payment Act, that covers a range of processes in terms of adjudication of disputes. Farm debt mediation, that was an initiative of the Marshall government and put into place very quickly, and we have done 15 mediations, and of those 14 we've actually mapped a path forward. So it is a very varied legislative responsibility, but again all aimed at small business. Talked about the Security Payment Act. For those that are in the building industry, there is a draft bill that is out there for consultation at the moment, and that closes next week. More recently, I've done an enormous amount of work in terms of working with businesses on Kangaroo Island and also in the Adelaide Hills to get through what has been a very, very difficult period for many of them and indeed the communities. I've been on KI every week for the last 4, and I'll be continuing to travel there regularly as we help businesses there through a very difficult situation, and there is the issue of access to the island and the loss of tourism that's had enormous impacts. Absolute credit to local government. When I was in Pandana on the first day, I saw this grader heading down the road at a great rate of knots, and then it was followed by another one from Port Adelaide Enfield Council. And that was the story. Everyone, councils have jumped in from across the state to provide support, and congratulations to your council for supporting people in the Adelaide Hills and the city of Mount Barker, and indeed Adelaide Hills Council, because it is very difficult for anyone to deal with disasters of these magnitudes. One of the areas that has been a constant in my 5.5 years in this role has been the issue of the impact of roadworks on small business. And we've had quite some really difficult cases, particularly involving the Torrens to Torrens and Dipty, and from time to time with councils. We work with the parties to try and navigate issues, deal with issues as they arise, but one thing that became very clear was that engagement at the earliest possible time before shovels go into the ground often produced much better results. Interestingly, the Unley Council engaged with us very early in terms of King William Road in Hyde Park. Again, even before they'd finalised the plans, to try and map out what were the best ways of trying to deal with a very, very difficult project in a very busy road. And I'm pleased to say that despite some of the difficulties that we had, it was a very, very positive process with the council and indeed with the traders, and there were blips along the way, but overall I think the result has been very commendable in terms of the council managing that project. Again, with Dipty, King William Street and the replacement of the tram tracks produced some particular challenges for business. We engaged with Dipty and indeed in a couple of cases managed some solutions to some pretty difficult problems in that. Adelaide City Council, City of Adelaide, they came to us again very early in terms of Gawler Place and that big project, again mapping out the businesses, early consultation, understanding the business's needs, the customer's needs. One of the important things was to maintain customer flow throughout. And I'm pleased to say after that project, and you can see there they did some night work to get through some particular parts of the project, we did not have one complaint from the traders. And that's where we'd like to be, and that's where we try and work with councils to get there. So what have we done about that? We've actually produced a guide. I've drawn on information my colleagues had interstate and indeed locally what we've picked up, and we've put together a guide to help governments, it's both state and local, contractors and indeed the small businesses. How do you get through this? So there's guidelines there for everyone to try and get through what aren't easy processes, but you can do it. We provide information sessions on a range of topics to assist small business. We run those in our boardroom in the city, and indeed we put them out on webinar, because one of the issues I'm very conscious of is not everyone can get into the city, and we've got a whole army of small businesses out there across the state, and they should have access to these sessions. The Small Business Friendly Council program, you might see a familiar face there on the left. We launched that in Whyalla in 2017, and you might say, why Whyalla? Well, when our administration occurred, it was a very, very serious blow to the city of Whyalla, and businesses and the community were just in a state of shock, I think, initially, as the administrators moved in, what was going to happen. I was up there on a regular basis working with the businesses and indeed the council in particular, the local chamber, to try and make sure that problems that were arising with the various businesses or indeed in the community hit the radar back at government level in Adelaide, and things were actually put into place. As we worked through the process and things moved on, we looked at what else could we do, and one of the issues that I'd been working on was the Small Business Friendly Council program, working with councils to
work with their local business community. And when it came to launch time, there was no better place than Whyalla, and I'm very pleased to say that this program has continued to grow. What we ask councils to do is to sign up to a charter. It's up there on the screen. I won't go through each one. I use the Sam Kekovich term. When you look at it, you know it makes sense in terms of engaging with your businesses, understanding their needs as you do with the broader community, and working in terms of a partnership to build on those relationships that can be a win-win for everyone. The Charter sets out some broad benchmarks and commitments, but we also ask councils, if you're doing work in these areas, can you report back to us on an annual basis that how you're working with small business, and we share that information with the other member councils, and indeed once a year we run a workshop to highlight the best practice in terms of what councils are actually doing, so other councils can benefit from that. Again, it's just designed to strengthen the engagement. Councils are the closest to their small business and indeed the community. We know that. It's not state government, it's the councils, and that's where we're keen to work with the councils in that regard. I won't spend a lot of time on that, but it is important. We do provide you with a charter which you can put up. We've got a whole range of participating councils there. I'd like to think that Burnside may join us at a point in the future because I think there'd be a lot of benefits, and certainly your CEO is well aware of what we do and how it works. Next steps, I think everyone knows where they can find me. The other part of my role is being very much out in the regions and recognising that the state doesn't stop at the 5 ways at Jepps Cross, and I spent a lot of time in the country with Business SA and their Regional Voice program, but also we go to the field days and again work with local government on particular issues from time to time. Phone call away, email away, like us on Facebook because that's how I keep you up to date with what I'm doing, and ready to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks very much for coming along tonight. I've just got a couple of quick questions. What's the current definition of small business?
It depends if you're state or Commonwealth, and the reason I say that is I think the Commonwealth, the number of definitions of small business is 56, depending on which agencies.
56 employees.
In my area, the Act is deliberately silent. I wasn't in this role when the Act was created, but I was certainly consulted. And I did ask that same question, and the architect of the legislation said to me, we're actually going to be deliberately silent because there are a business that is small, there's some that medium, and there's the issue of imbalance of power. So there are two main tests. Does it look, sound, walk like a small business? Yes. Or is there an imbalance of power? Now, I've had a number of disputes where I've had what you'd say is a medium-sized business, but with an international company, and I won't go into the details, and there's a disagreement, and I look at, is there an imbalance of power? Who's got the deepest pockets? A company in the US, Japan, and I'm talking a multinational company compared to an Adelaide business. So that it is deliberately silent. Hopefully that answers your question.
And just one other question. What's your jurisdiction under the Work Health and Safety Act? I wasn't aware that you had one.
It's a very small part of the Act. It is to provide the Minister with advice in relation to the codes. Work health and safety, you have the legislation, you have the regulations, and then you have codes of practice. For example, operating at heights. So if you're on roofs, there is a code of practice that governs what you need to do in terms of those areas. Any new codes that are developed are run through me, and I look at it through the prism of small business and say, yes, that's good, or perhaps you might want to change the wording so it's more relatable, or I don't think this is going to work at all. No, not at all. In fact, it's not even development, it's providing advice from a small business perspective on it.
Councillor Dawes.
Excellent presentation, John. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You mentioned about King William Road in Unley, and every time I open a messenger, right, it's criticising what Unley have done. There's a residents group and so forth. But you said tonight that it's been very successful. You know, do you get upset with the media when you hear all those things, or are there two sides to the story here?
There's always different points of view.
Yeah.
That was always going to be a difficult project, because one of the things that replacing the pavers had to be done because the substrate was collapsing. And it seemed that virtually everyone remembered when those pavers were laid 30 years ago and the length of time that it took. So it almost preset a view of what was going to happen with this particular project. And look, media will seek out what they think is the interesting angle to it. But when I look back and think of the engagement, for me it was about the engagement with the businesses. How are we going to deal with 4 weeks of road closure? And that wasn't easy for the businesses either. There was one particular business a food business, and the owner was in pretty difficult time, and I worked with her, and in the end there were simple things that we did. Put a Facebook post to say, go down and support the businesses on Unley Road, and I'd do that on radio. Leon Biner would ring me on a number of occasions, and it was amazing how that gained its own traction. And I suppose I look for the positives too, because the Tiser ran a really good article on, hey, if you've got young kids that like diggers, there's no better place to go than take them down there, you have a coffee while your kids watch the work in action. And it was a cracker. One of my staff's got a young child, and she said, John, it was the absolute best day I've had, because he could watch all the action and I just sat back and enjoyed coffee and a meal. So, look, they're always going to be difficult. It's how you manage it. And again, council's engaging with the businesses and the project managers, so it is a partnership. And importantly, some of it you just have to keep going through. You know, you will get negative press, but if you genuinely engage with people, it does limit the criticism.
Thank you.
Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, John. In this line of work, you come across a lot of startups. And I know we have Propel SA, who provide advice to startups. But do you do that as well? Because I noticed you had your workshops and networking sessions and so forth. But do you provide one-on-one time with people who are thinking about setting up a business and signing a lease and all that stuff?
We'll provide general information. The thing I say with it, if you're signing a lease, is, you know, invest in a lawyer to go through it. It generally is a 5-year commitment, and so we sort of tailor-make our information. We don't provide legal advice as much as I'd like to, but I would need much greater resource to do that. In terms of startups, that is very much the area of the Chief Entrepreneur, Jim Wally, and Lot 14, and the government has put an enormous focus in that area. And they are well equipped to provide information on startups and point people in the right direction and take them through what they need to do. But businesses, there is no one size fits all. It's often people start with an idea and away they go. You know, we provide information. I have a view that it's probably not best for people in government to be telling people how to do business. You know, we will provide them with the information. If they have disputes, we'll help them sort through that. But it's not for me to tell someone how to, well, I think you should be doing this. There are experts in those fields, and that's where we tend to point people to.
Okay.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, John. Thank you very much for the great presentation. Just curious, you know the DIPTI submissions that are due at the 28th of February, the end of this month, regarding the planning and design code. In that planning and design code, there's going to be impact to small business in little local shopping precincts, possibly, you know, in the future. So I was just curious whether the Commissioner is also going to coordinate perhaps a submission on behalf of local businesses, for example, little precincts like Dulwich or Tusmore, businesses that might be wondering, well, what is the impact on my small business if this code goes ahead? Because I understand that these small precincts, especially in the city of Burnside, will change. So the zoning means, larger scale developments can happen next door to them. So it probably could change the landscape of their business. Do you have any comments?
It's not been something that's been raised with me.
Okay.
I have to say I'm pretty selective in where I do put submissions because of the size of our office. And the planning area and the planning code is a very big area, and I would be encouraging local government who are right at the forefront of this to be responding to those. And hence, if I come back to probably to myself and the Small Business Friendly Council, if you're working with your local businesses, you will know what the issues are and the administration will, and putting together a submission will fall into place relatively quickly.
So we could, we can perhaps reflect on that ourselves in our submission. Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, but the question's actually not for you, it's actually for the administration. We've got this great presentation. We've been requested to sign up to the council charter for small business. There's no motion to do so or to seek a report back. What's going to happen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought it was prudent to get John Long tonight, so you could kind of hear from the horse's mouth. I'll show my hand. I think the program's beneficial, but what I would like to do before I actually ask council to sign up is I'd just like to do a little more homework internally, just to understand our current capabilities and what we're currently doing, so I can inform a bit of a report to council. So watch this space. I'll bring something back once I've got all my pieces of the puzzle organised. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you for coming. Small bars. Small bars are a small business. Why aren't they allowed to operate in a suburban area like Burnside?
I know.
Very good question. That is a government policy area. Again, no one has raised a small bar issue with me except for you tonight. It really is that broad policy issue. Small bars in the CBD was certainly an initiative under the Weatherall government, and I know there is some arguments for it to be out there. There are also other businesses that operate in your areas, such as hotels, and there are differing views in terms of small bars, and I'm aware from the hotel industry, it's probably fair to say they're not particular fans of small bars. So again, a lot of this, particularly in planning, is finding the balance and finding the appropriate people who are going to support the change.
Councillor Hughes.
It's perhaps a question to the administration, but I'm just wondering, I guess, the links between what we've heard about this evening and Propel SA that we're also a member of.
I think it's quite a complementary link. Certainly, I'm really encouraged by the work that Propel are doing, and that's why perhaps in my report I'll draw on those linkages to make it really clear how they work together.
Well, thank you very much for coming in, John. And
thank you for the opportunity.
It's been really interesting to hear what you have to say about the organisation and how it operates, and I know I'm pretty confident that we'll be communicating again, and if not through this organisation, through Propel.
Thank you very much.
So thank you again for coming in. Now we move on to 13.2, which is the request for interstate travel. Elected member Councillor Davis. Is there anyone who wishes to move this motion on behalf of Councillor Davis? Okay, Councillor Davey.
So move, Your Worship.
All right. You don't wish to speak to it at all?
No,
okay.
It's just a very worthwhile opportunity, I think, and I think it will be beneficial to both Councillor Davis and the council. So I think it's
seconded
very
by Councillor Cornish.
Yeah.
All right. Don't wish to speak? All right. All the names have gone, so happy to put it? Okay. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now we move to voting member. Do we have any nominations for the Greater Adelaide Regional Organisation of Councils? Because if we do not, sorry, Councillor Cornish.
Councillor Lemon, are you interested?
Seconder? You happy to second? Or,
I was just going to
I haven't.
second your nomination.
Okay, we've got a second over here or over there. Councillor Jones, I think you've got your hand in or your words in first. Okay, Councillor Jones, we'll leave it with you. That's seconded. Does anyone wish to speak on the matter? It's pretty much an automatic nomination that goes to the LGA, and then the LGA then sends it all out to all of us, and then all the councils have the opportunity to vote on nominations. All right, so it will just we will just insert Councillor Lemon's name in item 2. So it will read, I haven't got, that's different from what's on here. Oh, the second part's dropped off. Okay, all right. So those in favour of Councillor Lemon being nominated for Garrup, those... No, it's not a paid position. Those in favour, those against, that carried. Thank you. Yes. Well, I thought we might just go straight through them, unless that you would rather... There aren't a lot of them. And I thought we'd go for half an hour, see how we get through, and then have a break, if that's the will of the group. So we'll move on to bylaw management and enforcement. Who would like, is there anyone who wishes to withdraw that for debate? Councillor Piggott.
I'd just like to ask a question. I'd like to ask a question on the 10 versus the 20 metres.
Oh, that's the next one.
Oh, sorry.
That's 13.5.
I'm sorry. I'm happy
That's
to
right.
let
So
it
you're
roll
happy
through.
to move? Are you happy to move 13.4, Councillor Piggott, and seconded by Councillor Cornish? All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right. So we move to 13.5. And is there anyone who wishes to move that motion or make any changes to Councillor Lemon?
I actually did press my button. I have an amendment. And that should be on screen. Now, in red, you'll see in red how it changes from the original. So we've got this here now. My change is that in part 1, number 1, we are looking at all fenced areas exclusively used as playgrounds. What the bylaw is silent on is dogs within playgrounds, fenced playgrounds. This essentially then makes all fenced playgrounds, the inside of fenced playgrounds, dog-free. So it's not just keeping them on a lead within 20 metres of the playground and then having them free within it, or even on a lead within it. It is that they will be not in the playground. And that is also picked up at 2.1. Public playgrounds that are not dog-free areas and land within 20 metres of such public playgrounds. So it's on lead within 20 metres of those playgrounds and all land within 20 metres of the Tusmore wading pool. Now, in reading this report, there was talk about why it was 20 metres and not 10, or why it was different for Tusmore wading pool. The report actually isn't silent on this. It does say that it is extra because at the wading pool, children and very young children often are wearing much less in the way of clothes and therefore are exceedingly more vulnerable to any attack by a dog, so that was actually put in to keep them safer. And 2.3 addresses issues that have been raised by residents about what constitutes sports. So we're in fact fleshing that out. Grass sports grounds, basketball, netball and tennis courts, where there are organised sporting activities being carried out, and that includes training by clubs and associations that use local government land. And I think what we need to keep in mind here is that often what they do is they actually rent those playing fields, so it is prudent that they get to have their sporting matches and their training sessions without being worried about dogs running in and out. So they're my amendments that actually cover off what is essentially Burnside's council's falling in line with what is in the Dog and Cat Management Act, which is why we've had this come up. But there was a deputation earlier on saying, why are we doing this again? The reason we're doing this again is that our bylaws did not accord with what is now the Dog and Cat Management Act and what the Dog and Cat Management Board expects. This now brings us in line with what the Dog and Cat Management Act wants and clarifies some of the issues that we've had problems with in the past. So I hope you support it.
Do I have a seconder? I don't have a seconder. Councillor Piggott?
Look, I think I'm happy to second it. I still have the same question, but look, I am. Can I ask a question first? No, I will. Can I? Yeah. Yeah. Look, I still think we should, as a group, discuss the 20 versus 10, but I can come back to that. But in terms of seconding this, I think that's. I mean, I wasn't unhappy with the with where it, with the recommendation, but I think the changes brought by Councillor Lemon do actually make it more clear and less subjective, and I think it does actually add to the policy as a bylaw. So I am happy to second it.
You don't have that question?
No, I still have that question.
Okay, you'll say that up. Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Mayor. I do agree with Councillor Piggott on the clarity. My question is the definition of organised sport. In the document, it talks about all sporting games. In a letter from a resident on page 57, she or he explained the quandary of what is organised sport and what is structured sport. So Councillor Piggott and I and a couple of mates could have a game of soccer on a Sunday afternoon. Nobody's on that field. This is probably a question for administration. Is that regarded as organised sport, even though they haven't got a lease on the council land or anything like that? And that happens quite a lot. And the same with people that want to throw a ball around. Is that, they're having a game of, I don't know, whatever you call it, a bit of cricket or whatever, but it's not organised sport. It's not structured as such. So can I just put that question to the administration of how they would term organised sport?
Mr. Heinrich?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, the answer to the last two examples is no, they wouldn't constitute organised sport. In fact, the amended motion seeks to clarify what, in our view, organised sport is, and the key words, I think, are clubs and associations that use our land with the approval of council, and that might be way of lease or a licence or a permit. But we don't see that definition as extending to include a random game between mates that isn't subject to a lease or a licence.
Yes, but if you read 2.3, as Councillor Lemon has amended the initial officer's recommendation, it says, such time as there are organised sporting activities being carried out, including. So it could mean something, you know, she's given an example, but it also could mean something more than that. And that's my query.
Through the chair, the word including is meant to link training with sport. So take, for example, the Burnside Rugby Club. The organised sporting clause would apply to that club when it's playing a game, but also when there's structured training for that game.
I understand that, okay.
So that's the purpose of the word including. But the notion of sport, organised sport is we're trying to limit it to clubs and associations that have a lease or a licence.
Yeah.
Like the rugby club or the Kensington.
So we're not going to have a ranger going out there and Councillor Pickett and I are kicking a ball around and there's a dog within 20 metres. That's the question I have.
No, the ranger won't be trying to deal with two kids kicking a football.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Turnbull.
Yes, I'd like to clarify the word training, training for sporting activities. Now, does that include 8 people, 8 boys perhaps or girls, with a coach doing net practice at Kensington Gardens Reserve, and so the rest of the place is all free? Does that mean the dog walkers can't use that oval because you've got kids in the nets having a small training? Training that's not sort of defined there.
Through the chair, what we're trying to do is limit the scope of what organised sports meant. So again, if you take the example of the Burnside Rugby Club or any rugby club, the Old Collegians, for example, the 20-metre exclusion would apply during a rugby game and also structured training for a game, but wouldn't, if you like, spread to the entire reserve. It's only 20 metres from that training, so 90% odd of Kensington Gardens Reserve would still be available for dogs to be off-lead.
I think some of the
but
onus,
also under effective control, mind you.
some of the onus needs to be on the clubs as well, because we have a baseball club near us, and there was myself and my dog in the middle of this oval having a nice peaceful walk, and all of a sudden they converged, started chucking things around and hitting things. No, excuse me, can you get out? Just off we went. So we scuttled off. But there seems to be no onus for them to advise people that they're going to have a sporting practice. It's a hard one. Second one for the day.
Through the chair, I certainly take that point. Probably baseball in particular can be a little bit more spread out in terms of training. That's something that we can certainly take on board through our asset.
Maybe a sign up saying we do practice between 4 and 5, or
we can certainly take that on board.
Thank you.
Councillor Pickett.
Just following up on that, could we communicate with the baseball club at hand and explain that is a problem, and it might be best if they did have a protocol where they did speak to any residents with their dogs or without dogs before they start a practice? That doesn't seem an unreasonable thing to ask as a landlord and proud supporter of them over the years.
Of all of our sporting
and of their fence.
All of our sporting
All of their sporting clubs, but clearly this is an issue. Can I? My second question, if I may, sorry, is the magic of 20 metres versus 10? Why? I mean, 20 does seem a pretty wide arc that does eliminate quite a lot of, property in regard to have my dog off on leash. So, what is the magic of 20 versus 10, for instance?
Through the chair, there's no real magic to it. It's not a figure that's based in legislation or law. It's certainly an arbitrary figure, and 10, I guess, would be almost equally as good or equally as good.
Equally as good?
I think the reason we landed on 20 was perhaps a little bit conservative, but it also recognises the fact that unlike other surrounding councils, we don't have any off-lead, on-lead reserves or dog-free areas. Mitcham has 11 dog-free areas and 16 dog on-leash areas, for example. Unley has 18 on-leash areas. So perhaps it's a little bit conservative, but also recognises that we don't have that same level of coverage, if you like, as our other area councils. Having said that, there's nothing wrong with 10 metres.
And is the wading pool different from a playground? I mean, at the moment, my reading is it's the same in the rules.
Through the Mayor, we wanted to isolate the wading pool to make it, within the pool, a dog-free area, just so dogs are not actually in the pool itself.
Right.
We just felt that from at least a perception of health point of view, would it be best not to have dogs in the water? Hence recommendation 1, which talks about the Tasman wading pool and now all fenced areas exclusively used as playgrounds as dog-free areas. But dogs would also, within 10 or 20 metres of the wading pool, be on lead. So there's 2 controls in relation to the pool. Within the pool itself is dog-free.
No dogs.
But within a set distance, whatever the council lands on, it's dog on lead from the pool.
Right, okay. All right, thank you. Someone might look at an amendment.
Councillor Davey?
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Magnus Heinrich. I've got a couple of questions about, well, I note that currently our exclusion zone is 10 metres. I think we've got signs up in a lot of our parks, haven't we?
Through the Mayor, we do, but they have no formal basis to be there. They're effectively, while they might read as mandatory requirements, they're advisory in nature as it stands in the absence of a resolution.
But this would give us that teeth to actually have a ranger enforce that exclusion zone.
Yes.
And my other question relates to, through you, Your Worship, how many incidents we've had of attacks in I mean, it might be, I might have missed it in the report. How many attacks have we had in parks and around playgrounds, dog attacks? I'm not aware of any events.
That's certainly a question on notice. We've had one recently which resulted in the death of a dog.
So that was dog on dog?
Dog on dog, yeah. No, I don't think that had anything to do with the playground. Anecdotally, we think a lot of incidents go unreported, so we have no actual formal information about those. But certainly we don't get, it's not an alarming amount of attacks in our reserves.
Councillor Carver.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am concerned about 20 metres. As Councillor Piggott has already mentioned, it is a very wide arc. And I'm especially concerned because we have a long-standing bylaw that all dogs, whether on lead or off a lead, have to be under effective control. So given that that is a current standing law, why 20 metres? Because the dog will be under the same effective control under 10 metres anyway.
Through the Mayor, I guess I can refer to my previous answer. 20 metres and 10 metres are equally as good. They are both arbitrary figures and neither has basis in law. I guess if you were to argue for a larger figure, it does recognise that despite the law, dogs are not always under effective control. So I guess in reserves there are 3 broad categories of dogs: dogs that are on leads, dogs that are off lead but under effective control, and then ones in the middle, dogs that are not under effective control. 20 metres may give owners a little bit more of an opportunity to rein these dogs in and have them on lead within a certain distance. But again, I guess it's the council's call about whether we land on 10 or another figure.
Councillor Hubel.
I'd like to move an amendment, if I could. with the difference being we changed the 20 metres to 10 metres. In 2.1, 2.2, is that 2.3? Yep. Look, I very much take Councillor Carbone's point on, look, the regulations tell us effective controls where we're at. The exclusion zone seems to be a secondary backup, allowing for a bit of scope. I agree that, look, I put my faith in dog owners to be responsible, but I think that the 20 metres is a bit excessive, and I think that puts a bit of an unfair disadvantage to dog owners, and I think it really impacts quite negatively their ability to enjoy some spaces. Obviously, we're talking about Kensington Gardens, Hazelwood Park, not so much of an issue, but Dr. Jean's talked about Wood Park in Hazelwood Park. That is a large section in the corner there that becomes unusable by dog owners completely, and I just think this 20 to 10, while still achieving our obligations, just takes the impact off the dog owners and makes it a little bit easier for everybody. So I hope it's acceptable to the mover and seconder, and we can move us forward.
We do need a seconder for that, because it's not it's more than an amendment. It changes the rules completely. Yeah, so we have a seconder, do we? Okay, Councillor Carbone, is allowed to second because he's broken. Okay. Yeah, just go ahead.
I'm here asking a question, a very pertinent question. I've been.
We just need to second the motion first, and then I'll come back to you.
Well, someone can put their hand up. Well, I've got a very important question that I wanted to ask long before this was even put up. I want to know the implications.
But Councillor Davey, Councillor Hugel has moved an amendment. We now need to second the amendment before we can go on with any conversation. So I'm just seeking the second first, and then I'll come back to your question. And it will definitely be covered. So
I won't be long, Your Worship. I won't
Go
be
ahead.
long. So, look, dogs is a very sensitive topic in Burnside. We have 5,000 dogs in Burnside. Compare that to 45,000 residents. So we have a very high ratio of dogs to people in Burnside. And as Dr. Jean has already mentioned, the benefits of exercising dogs off leash, and I find 20 metres is cutting into a lot of open space that we have. Just thinking about the playground in Hazelwood Park, and you cause an arc around 20 metres, that's a lot. So 10 metres is a lot fairer. It allows people to exercise their dog, and of course all the social benefits as well. So I won't say any more, I'll leave it at that.
now, Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question relates to, through you to the staff, about the proposed amendments from Councillor Lemon about fenced areas exclusively used as playgrounds and public playgrounds that are not dog-free areas. What are the implications of these exclusions? Because I can see some implications in these. But
through the chair, the implications that, as we see it, is if you take, for example, the playground at the hub, that playground is fenced, and it's fenced exclusively for the uses of a playground. So resolution 1, should it pass, would the implication would be that particular playground would be a dog-free area, so no dogs.
so you wouldn't have dogs in there anyway.
I think the issue is that in the past we've had reports of people putting their dogs in there as some kind of a dog minding pen.
With the kids?
Yeah. However, the resolution 1 wouldn't extend to a fenced reserve that's got other uses in it. And that then brings in resolution 2. So if you've got a reserve that has a general reserve component and a playground and is fenced, then the default 2.1 would apply, in which it wouldn't be a dog-free area, but you would have to have your dog on a lead within, as it stands, 10 metres.
So that's my other concern, is that because in our area there are quite a few areas, Constable Hyde Gardens plus Knightsbridge Reserve that are, that are fenced but have playgrounds, and people would not expect that they should have their dogs on a leash other than near the playing space for the children. Because otherwise what we're going to have is a severe delineation between our parks and our playgrounds, or else all the playgrounds individually fenced, which will cost an enormous amount of money.
Yes, and again through the Mayor, as we see it, the resolution 1 applies only to one playground, certainly the only one that I can think of, and that's the hub one.
So is it really necessary to have all fenced areas exclusively used as playgrounds in this motion? Is that a benefit?
Well, the motion as it stands would simply mean that one particular playground,
which is at Glenunga,
would not have dogs in it. Very true, and also the one at the Civic Centre by the Bill Dean Lounge. So that's 2. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have another question. I'm still not clear about grassed sports ground. You know, specifying playing areas and sports areas. Is that difficult to enforce and to inform people about?
Well, through the Mayor, the term grass sports ground was meant to encapsulate ovals and pitches. I guess would be I can't think of any more. You either have an oval or a pitch, essentially, where you're playing sport on a grassed area. We could have said ovals and pitches, but we just tried to distill it to a shorter term.
Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Just reflecting, got a question about the survey. My numbers here look like 2/3 of our respondents were in favour on the on-lead idea, and about 1/3 were opposed. So there's a fair big chunk of people who are really opposed to this on-lead idea. And further on in the paper, my question is, sorry, I'm just trying to get to it. You talked about options. So did you look at the option of selecting, as it says here in item 29, was there an option to select a couple of playgrounds that are definitely going to be on lead and just simplify this whole thing? And are you, pardon? All playgrounds be on lead? Sorry, I meant, no, not playgrounds, I meant parks, pardon, I used the wrong words, thank you. Parks. Yeah, just simplifying this, because I was wondering to issue fines. It sounds like it's going to be quite a tricky process for compliance officers to. So you've stepped over the mark. You're now within a 10-metre zone of this playground, and could you reflect on that, please?
Through the Mayor, this may seem the opposite in terms of intent, but in our minds, our approach was trying to simplify it.
Yep.
The reason I say that is that while we know there are opposing views to this whole issue about dogs on lead, the prevailing view that seems to come to the Chamber in particular is the view about freedom for dogs and dogs generally not being on leads. So that said, we didn't feel confident in isolating particular reserves and making them we were open to that if some options or examples came through the consultation process, but that didn't seem to happen. So we kept it as narrow and, in our mind, as simple as we could, and didn't complicate it by highlighting reserves and potentially chewing off grief where it needn't be.
So my other question is, I don't own a dog yet, but I'm thinking of getting one, and I'm just imagining I've got my dog on a lead, and if it's a 20-metre buffer, I kind of go, wow, I've got a fair bit of space here, I've got a judge, but I'm well away from this pool, I can control my dog. Yeah, 20 metres, I can do that in a 20 metres lane. But when it gets to 10 metres, I'm getting cut, it's getting a bit fine for me to manage my dog. 10 metres is not very far. So I just wondered whether 20 metres is actually better for a dog owner in making sure they stay well away, because the intent is no one's going to get hurt by a dog. So 20 metres would be better.
Oh, through the chair, there are clearly in the chamber some opposing views between those two figures. I guess one comment is that if a dog owner is having difficulty in identifying a distance, a dog owner doesn't have to enjoy the full extent of the law. So the law allows, unless the council resolves otherwise, for a dog to be exercised off-leash, provided it's under effective control. An owner may choose not to enjoy that full extent of the law and have a dog on the leash permanently. That's the owner's choice. I take the point that how do you know what 10 metres is? How do you know what 20 metres is? But I guess that would that's the issue facing all councils, trying to regularise this sort of thing. And I guess comes with experience as well and practice. Right. After a while, an owner will get, if it is going to be off the lead, will get to know what 10 metres looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll try and put my thoughts around that 10 to 20, just to maybe help a bit. I think it's more about the intention of talking about some distance. I think in terms of being a dog owner, whether we say it's 10 or 20 metres, it's important that we're just specifying that there is a distance that we expect you to be, your animal is not to interact with the children, for example. So I think whether we land or 10 or 20 metres, I think both are achieving that goal of sending a message to the dog owner that we are expecting a separation. I don't think we achieve so much of getting home on the finite amount of 10 or 20. It will send the right message either way, in my opinion.
Councillor Hughes.
I have a few questions. Firstly, I'm just wondering why the modification to Part 4, why we're putting it in the winter edition. So it might seem a rather arbitrary question, but I'm just wondering why there was that change from the autumn edition.
Through the Mayor, when the genesis of this report was in December at some point, at the height of summer, and at that point, in my mind, we could have made the autumn, at that time, made the autumn focus, but it's being printed on Thursday, so...
Okay, no, that's fine.
We have to push it to the next one.
No one else had asked the question yet. I just have a question around 2.3. I know we're getting stuck on this one, but I'm just thinking in terms of, you're at Kensington Gardens Reserve, there is a group of people undertaking a personal training session. Now, they're not a member of a club or association, but they seek a permit from council, so that would not be covered under 2.3?
No, I think 2.3 through the Mayor is broad enough to incorporate someone who has a permit.
So it's such as those, but not exclusively those? Okay. And I'm just wondering, Rob, if you could just scroll up, sorry. I just have a question. Why, so we're saying all fenced areas exclusively used as playgrounds. We're saying there are only 2 of those within the city. Should we not just list those to make it clearer and more concise for people? Because I think there are a number within our ward that they have playgrounds and a little bit of grass on the side, and I think that might cause confusion.
If I may, Madam Mayor. I think the intent of the wording is to future-proof it, so that it holds, so we won't have to amend this resolution if there are further developments that may be impacted by this.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question of administration for my own interest. Distance between me and Councillor Piggott, is that 10 metres? You pacing it?
Councillor Jones.
Can I just say, I think we are skirting on pretty thin ice of ignoring what the legislation says, in that we are not having a single dedicated park where people can walk in the knowledge that dogs will not come up to them because they're on a lead. So I just make that observation. I suspect I'm in a small minority on that view. I think 20 metres is a good length, and the reason I say that is I think a lot of these dogs are not under effective control, and a dog can cover 10 metres in a second. So at least if we have 20 metres, you'll probably get a de facto 10-metre exclusion zone. I mean, it's a bit like speed limits, isn't it? I see a lot of people going at 65 when the speed limit's 60. So I think if we had 20 metres, you might get in practice 10. So I can't support the 10-metre amendment. I'd be much happier with the 20 metres.
Councillor Davey.
I'll just ask this other question. Thanks, Your Worship. When the CEO answered that last question, I rather gathered that there's an intent that we have more exclusively fenced playgrounds. Was that the intent of your comment?
No, my intent, sorry, I certainly was not foreshadowing that we're going to create more. I was just saying, if it occurred, I do not have a mind to create any more at the moment. It was just if they happen to occur.
Propose that.
Thank you.
I think the other issue is that there are more than two anyway, and if you start listing them all, we'd probably leave something out. So it's better
and we would
have
have
them
to
not.
do big consultation with our community. I'm just going to have my 10 cents worth. I think we are skating on thin ice with our community if we change our whole approach significantly. And I think this motion really changes our current dog management practices significantly. We're not having any dog attacks in Burnside. When we have 5,000 plus dogs in Burnside, and we have a huge number of interactions every day, and those of us who walk our dogs every day in the parks around Burnside know there are huge numbers of interactions that are friendly, peaceful, between residents, old and young, visitors and dogs. I don't think we have a problem. Certainly the legislation has changed and we have to comply with that, but we have a really 99% of dog owners are law-abiding, very responsible residents and visitors to our area. We will have outrage if we start to encroach upon sporting activities and starting to restrict our parks anymore because of sporting activities. I don't think we can seriously say that we should have an exclusion zone of more than 10 metres. We've got one already in Hazelwood Park from my experience that is generally observed, but there is that small percentage of people who take their dogs into the playground and at Wombat Waterhole, people who even put their dogs down the slides and do all sorts of things you wouldn't believe. The rest of us walk past with the 10-metre exclusion zone with our dogs on our lead, or even walk through the playground with our dogs on our leads, and it all works very well. I would be happy to support the officer's recommendation with the 10-metre exclusion zone, and I think that is exactly what we should be having. But I don't believe we should be excluding all these other areas. I think we're setting ourselves up for trouble.
Councillor Hughes.
I have a question. Councillor Jones insinuated that the proposal that was the officer's recommendation, or perhaps this recommendation, does not meet the legislative requirements. Is that the case?
Through the chair, we did test this with our legal advisors, and we just sneak in the timed restrictions, which is effectively the sporting restrictions, doesn't in itself doesn't get us across the line, but the distance from the playground, strictly speaking, does allow us to comply with the Dog and Cat Management Act.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you again. My final question relates to resourcing. There hasn't been any indication of resourcing and how we're going to police and enforce these new measures. Can you give us some clarification? Do we need to ask for more money in the budget coming up, or do we have the resources we've got at the moment to do a marketing campaign as well as enforce?
Through the chair, it was our intention to deal with this within existing resources. We have rangers out there now during hours and after hours, and we're confident that we'll be able to enforce the new resolution adequately.
Oh, I don't have any more names on here. I'd like to move the amended motion, but do you wish to speak? Who was it again? You don't do it in a summary, do you? So, happy, I'm going to move the this is the 10 metre, the amendment with the 10 metre measure in it. Right, so all those in favour of... It's exactly the same as up there, only instead of 20 metres, it's 10 metres. Right, so no other changes in red have occurred, only that the 10 metres replaces the 20 metres. It's the only difference, okay? So those in favour of the 10 metre amendment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. All right. The motion, the amended motion up there now is that you are voting for or against the 10 metre distance. Yes. Yes. Yeah, but with 10 metres, which was changed from Councillor Lemon's motion, which had 20 in it. Okay, so I'm going to do it again. Those in favour of the 10 metre, please raise your hands. Those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right, it's lost. So now we go back to the original motion, which was put by Councillor Lemon.
No, I'd like...
You wish to speak?
I wish to move an amendment. If I can. I am
yes,
very
of course
sorry.
you can.
I am very sorry. No, I'm not changing. No, I'm not changing that. I just want to. First off, if I can ask a question specifically regarding 2.3, the basketball, netball, and tennis courts, not the sporting grounds. Does that include fully enclosed and fenced, where you actually have to open a gate to get into well, we don't really have any basketball or netball in the city of Burnside, but we do have lots of tennis courts. We've got tons of tennis courts, and some of them have locked gates. Does this include a locked gate tennis court that someone walking down the side of the road will have to put their dog on a lead 20 metres before, and then they can take it 20 metres off after they've walked past?
Through the Mayor, as it's written, it does include those.
Can I move an amendment to say, to clarify the basketball, netball and tennis courts to say unenclosed? Would that cover that off? To include unenclosed?
Point of order. Yes. That
I get,
That's not a point of order. Point of order, enclosed tennis courts are usually off the street, not within parks.
Just clarification.
Thank you. Clarification, it's not a point of order.
I,
It's too confusing, Peter. It's just a minefield.
can I say, yeah, unenclosed? Could I also clarify and tidy up the last bit, because the Councillor Dawes raised the training sort of session. Can we say sporting activities and training? No, the sentence above it. Sporting activities and training being carried out. Get rid of including training for such activities. Keep going. Yeah. That's my amendment, just to clarify where it's at, and I move that amendment.
I think
Right. Sorry. Yeah, I just want to fully understand the ramifications of this. If, in terms of, can you just tell me, just briefly, in general terms, if we've got all these parks in the city of Burnside and we've got playgrounds within them, we've got tennis courts and all these things, does this mean that might be some parks with these facilities in them where you wouldn't be able to have your dog off-lead at all because of this 20-metre distance? Or are all these parks going to have plenty of, all of them have off-lead possibilities for a dog owner?
Through the Mayor, I think it's going to depend on the size of the reserve.
Yes.
Is the short answer to that. So the larger parks like Hazelwood Park and Kensington Gardens Reserve and Kensington Park Reserve will still have ample room for dogs to be exercised under effective control off-leash. Some of our smaller pocket parks, however, will probably mean that the dogs will need to be on leashes in those little small parks.
So do we understand the community's, acceptance or not? Is that a third of the people that don't like this in the survey? Are they the people that are going to be impacted?
Well, through the Mayor, the survey results don't go down to that level. The questions were pitched at a high level. So, for example, do you support dogs being on a lead a certain distance from all playground equipment and all parks and reserves? So it's pitched at that high, all parks and reserves. It didn't drill down to, well, what do you think is going to happen in Knightsbridge Reserve, for example?
Yeah.
The questions doesn't get that to that fine level of fine grained detail.
Okay. So we don't know the full impact?
No, well, through the Chair, no, we don't know everyone's view about everything.
Okay, thank you.
Hughes. Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. I'll sum up. Thank you. Thank you all for your thoughtful comments on this. I draw your attention to page 47, which has the result of the survey that we took, which was what the good doctor was talking about earlier on, because we'd done one last year, but we did another one just recently because we are forced to comply with the Dog and Cat Management Act. What you'll see is 204 people supported dogs on leads within a certain distance of a playground. 91 didn't. 215 people supported dogs on lead a certain distance from sporting games. So we're actually following what our community told us. And do you know what? 300 people responding to a community survey is pretty good. I mean, it was said that it wasn't good. It's pretty good for Burnside, I think. So I just think that, you know, we are actually providing what our community has said is acceptable, as well as fulfilling our obligations under the Dog and Cat Management Act. Now, the amendments are made here. In particular, there was a degree of confusion about playgrounds that are fenced. What happened at Glenunga was that small dogs were put in that playground while their owners were quite happily having coffee elsewhere. I actually had complaints from parents saying that their children then were going into an unsafe environment because the owners hadn't picked up the dog poo. And their kids, when they were toddlers and putting things in their mouth, they felt that not good. Now, this was when Louise Miller Frost was still working here, and we couldn't, in fact, stop that because there was no bylaw to stop that. There was no bylaw to stop people from putting their dog in a playground and having the fenced playground mind the dog. The playground's there for the children. So this actually addresses that issue. I take Councillor Davies' point that 99% of people do the right thing. And you know what? 95% of people do the right thing across the board. The reason we've got a police force, courts, rules and regulations and parliamentary acts is for those 5% of people that don't do the right thing. And it's those 5% of people that put their dogs into playgrounds, that leave them roam free, that don't put them on leads when they're walking them down the street, that bring us to this point. It's not the people that are responsible that bring us to this point. It's the people that are irresponsible that cause us to have bylaws. So I just think we need to be mindful of that. It's not the dog lovers whose dogs are under effective control that have consideration for others that we pass these laws, these bylaws for. It's the ones that don't care and are inconsiderate that cause us to actually have what we've had, and that is a debate that's gone on for close to an hour. So I hope you do support this. This actually brings us into line with the overarching state government body. It doesn't change things too much, I don't think, and in fact, for people that are responsible dog owners, it changes things not at all.
Those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost. Now, Councillor Carbone.
Have you got mine?
You're going back?
Have you got mine?
Oh, sorry, apologies. It's Councillor Davey.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move in accordance with the officer's recommendation with, at 1, the addition that declare pursuant to section 2463E of the Local Government Act and clause 8 of bylaw 5 dogs, the Tusmore Wading Pool and Glenunga Hub play space as dog-free areas. Is that the right terminology?
Pencil Park, isn't it? I call it Pencil Park.
We need the proper Glenunga.
You know what it means.
And at 2, declare pursuant to section 2463E of the Local Government Act 1999 and clause 5.2 of bylaw 5 dogs, the following areas of local government land as dog on leash areas. 2.1, all public playgrounds and land within 10 metres of public playgrounds. 2.2 as read. 2.3, all land within 20 metres of Tusmore wading pool. 2.4, all land on and within 10 metres of organised sporting ovals, pitches and fields during such time as there is organised sport being carried out and during such time as there is organised training for sports being carried out. Amend the current City of Burnside Dog and Cat Management Plan 2018 to 2023 to reflect the newly declared dog on leash areas. 4, notify the community through various media, including the Council's website and the winter edition of Focus. 5, establish appropriate signage in relation to the dog-free area and dog-on-leash areas. And 6, adopt an educative approach till 1st of June 2020, after which time expiations may be used to ensure compliance with the dog-on-leash areas. Hopefully, after all the debate that we've had tonight, and all of the work that the staff has done, I think this will be an appropriate way to introduce the changes and reinforce our responsibilities under the Dog and Cat Management Act to essentially tighten up our dog management dogs on leash areas. I don't think we need, as we have also heard, I don't believe, from my personal experience and day-to-day interaction walking my dogs around Burnside, that we have a major problem. I accept that there might be the odd occasions where we have had dog interactions, but in terms of, or negative dog interactions with people and other dogs, in terms of managing our dog population in Burnside, we do a damn good job. Our rangers are well trained and we have responsible dog owners. I think this should address the issues that have been raised. It conforms with the feedback we have got, which Councillor Lemon outlined in terms of our public response to people supporting dogs on leash within playgrounds and sporting activity. And I think hopefully this will be supported. So thank you. I hope you'll support it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I just seek a point of clarification with the mover? By excluding Glenunga Hub in number 1, we probably need to add into 2.1 and 2.2 the words excluding Glenunga Hub. Place. Oh, yep, that'll work. Yep, I just don't want to trip ourselves up. Okay, contradicting ourselves.
I'm delighted to second this motion, Your Worship, and I have one tip. If I could give any new elected member on this council a tip, it's this: do not upset dog owners. Okay, they are very, very passionate in Burnside. We have 5,000 dogs. That's a lot of dogs compared to the amount of people that we have in Burnside. Go, and if you're unsure, if you're not a dog owner, take my word for it, take Councillor Davies' word for it. People who go to Hazelwood Park literally every day, okay, and hang out with fellow dog owners who watch their dogs run around and so forth. It is absolutely fantastic. There are never, ever, ever any problems, okay? I've been walking my dog in Burnside for 30 years, okay? Never had an issue, okay? And if there was one issue, hypothetically, whether it was 10 or 20, wouldn't have made any difference whatsoever, okay? Because it was just a monster or whatever, okay? So do not upset dog owners. They're very passionate. They are our children, okay? In the eyes of dog owners, they are their children. Do not upset them, okay? And look, that's all I'll say. 10 metres is fine. 20 metres would have been going to war on dog owners, and that's the last thing we want in this chamber. And dogs are always under effective control. And if they're not under effective control, the owners know that, and they wouldn't take them off the lead anyway. So 10 metres is fine. If you're on the fence, if you're unsure, if you don't know, take the advice of people who do know, who are dog owners in this chamber.
Councillor Lemon.
I just thought I would actually put some perspective in this. There's 5,000 dogs in Burnside. That's 5,000 residences in 25,000 residences. The amount of dog owners in Burnside constitute 20% of our residential households. 80% of our residential households are non-dog owners. I think you would do well to keep that in mind.
Councillor Henschke.
And adding to that, what Councillor Lemon said, those 80% of dog owners, I have spoken to some of them, and they are frightened of dogs, and they are frightened of walking in our parks with their grandchildren, for example. So not everyone knows when someone is frightened of dogs around their grandchildren walking past. And with that in mind, I'm glad we had a good debate, and this goes towards helping them being clear about what their rights are. Thank you.
Councillor Hubel.
Yeah, I did want to jump in again. Look, I'm happy to support this motion as it stands, and I think there has been some very good conversations, and I think we might be close to a solution, hopefully. I did, look, I think there's some very, very strong views on both sides of this issue. I know that, obviously we know that the benefits of dog ownership are enormous, and I don't think anyone is denying that. And we're balancing that with, you know, the rights of people who are terrified of dogs to also enjoy the park. And that's what we're constantly doing. We're always balancing up, you know, the rights or perspectives against each other. I think this is a good balance, and I hope we can move on and make a good decision.
Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I think I agree with Councillor Lemon. 5,000 dogs compared to 45,000 people really is the tail wagging the dog. However, I think this is probably the motion that's going to pass, and on the basis that the perfect is the enemy of the good, I suspect I will have to support it.
Councillor Cornish.
Sorry, can I offer a slight amendment that might be taken as a variation? Rob, it might be taken as a variation. So in 2.4, organised sporting ovals, pitches, courts and fields unenclosed in brackets.
I'll accept that. Thank you, Councillor Day. Thank you, Councillor Davey and Councillor Carver.
I think that significantly weakens the motion as proposed.
It's not an amendment, and it's got the imprimatur of the mover and the seconder, so it becomes the motion.
Councillor Pickett.
Look, I'll support this motion. I think the relevance necessary of how many dog owners there are and sort of who we should be staying on the right side of is perhaps not the way to make good decisions. I think with all boiled down the conversation tonight, actually the big play is 10 metres versus 20 metres. The way I read it, it was pretty much the recommendation coming from administration that we're now dealing with. I did think that some of the changes actually in the first motion did work to clarify it better, but the recommendation's fine. But I do think 10 metres is not an unreasonable space to put, and I do think 20 is, because Councillor Lemon's question about how far 10 metres is, I do feel that from me to Aaron is a reasonable moat around playgrounds, etc., sporting fields, and I think when we're talking about it being a message and it doesn't matter whether it's 10 or 20, well, I think putting an amount certainly sends a message to dog owners, that's good. But I think making it 20, that actually makes some small parks unusable for dogs without leashes, is a message in itself, and one that I don't think's appropriate, whether there's 5,000 or 25,000 of them. So I think actually it's unsurprising we've spent a lot of time on it, and it's important, but I will support it.
Councillor Hughes.
I will support the motion as it stands. I think we've gone through quite a few iterations this evening. I think this finds a good balance with where we need to go. I think as a parent that takes their children to playgrounds, I think the fact that dogs, have to be on leashes within those play spaces should provide, relief for parents. And I know that there are a lot of parents around whose children, if you don't have a dog, can be very confronting for a little person to be sniffed by one. So I think this finds a good balance for everyone.
Right, back to Councillor Davey.
Thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I'm happy to sum up. Thank you, everyone, for your very interesting and varied opinions and contributions. I think it's been a very useful exercise for a very important area in Burnside. While we might have 5,000 dogs registered, we have very many who visit us from very many other areas. So there is a lot of investment in dog management in Burnside. I just make that point because it isn't just our households that it affects. It affects people who come and visit our coffee shops, many of our businesses and facilities in Burnside, where people walk their dogs to them and utilise them. So dogs are good for business in Burnside. And we don't really have a problem with dog behaviour and interaction with humans. Sorry. We've heard the benefits of dog walking as an exercise and how important it is to many of our age groups, and particularly our mature age population. I think this is a really good motion and will assist the administration with the challenges they've got, because they're at the pointy end when there is a hullabaloo and the worst thing happens. So if this helps the administration administer our responsibilities better, I think this is the way to go. And I accept what Councillor Pickett has said, that 10 metres is a reasonable exclusion zone for those structures and playgrounds and spaces that we feel shouldn't interact with, where children are playing or swimming. We've addressed the two big areas that are of concern, being the Tusmore Wading Pool and the Glenunga play space, which has had some problems. So I hope that you'll support this and we can move on and have a wonderful promotional and education campaign, and that everybody will be happy with their dogs in Burnside. Thank you.
Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Division's been called. So those who voted in favour, please stand. Councillor Piggott, Councillor Davey, Councillor Hughes, Councillor Cornish, Councillor Henschke, Councillor Hubel, Councillor Dawes, Councillor Turnbull and Councillor Carbone. Against, Councillor Lemon and Councillor Jones. Motion is carried. Can I have a motion for a 10-minute break? Councillor Hughes, Councillor Davies, seconded. All those in favour, I'm assuming. Councillor Piggott.
Yeah, Mayor, could I ask that we move to debate 13.10 next, which is the planning?
Yes, I'll
Could we do
second
that?
because we're running out of time.
I just think it'd be a shame if we got the squeeze at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, we're going to make it.
I've got two big ones.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm happy to second that.
We'll start with 1310, Planning and Design Code Phase 3, Council Submission, page 155. So do we have Councillor Piggott, you wish to move?
I do. And I wish to move largely consistent with the officer's recommendation with a change to clause 4. Look, we've all spent a lot of work, done a lot of work on this. Not as much as the staff, I should hasten to add. In fact, no, it's probably not true. I haven't done a lot of work on this. But I have been informed pretty well over a number of months in regard to what's in the proposed plan. And what we have before us is a significant body of work to go through as our submission on behalf of the ratepayers of Burnside. From my reading, it seemed very comprehensive. I felt it was well put together in terms of how it was explained, and so I congratulate the staff to putting that together. And the point 3, which is 1, 2 and 3, which is by and large authorising its progress into the official consultation process, I'm very happy to support as recommended. I do want to propose a different number 4, which I will read, and that is, I wish to request the Mayor to write to the Honourable Vicky Chapman MP, the Honourable David Pisoni MP and the Honourable Vincent Tarzia MP, enclosing a copy of the Planning and Design Code Phase 3 submission, informing them of our detailed submission to the public consultation for the draft Planning and Design Code, and the Community Information Draft Planning and Design Code, which is the document we got today, received today via email, which is to go out to every resident of Burnside, and seeking their proactive advocacy on behalf of the residents of the City of Burnside, in particular on the following major issues. A, the inclusion of some areas of our city into the general neighbourhood and housing diversity zones, creating an arbitrary tier system of residential development within the city. B, ensuring that local variations listed for areas included in the suburban neighbourhood zone are consistent with existing development plan standards as undertaken, I prefer that, I've got that word wrong, I think, in public statements by the government. Perhaps it should read as assured. The potential for reduced protection for council's contributory items and significant trees in particular under the proposed code, and the proposed change which will allow additional dwellings, 2-storey buildings and change of use to non-residential without the need to notify neighbouring residents. And my logic there was, and I feel we should, I'm keen not to ambush the debate of the whole thing by number 4, but if I just could explain my logic, is that I feel we should try and really engage with our MPs in regard to those 4 major items as I see them, and we'll send them the whole document, that's fine, but it's a very big document, it covers a lot of ground, and I think it is fair to say that, and they are not probably in a position to really go in hard on every single one of them. So my logic is that we could, if we are asking them here to advocate on all of them, but if by raising this in the public arena, raising those 4 above the rest, we could actually trigger something where they did focus heavily on that, and as a result bring their input into the final code. I feel that might be, that's a good way to go. The recommendation was to provide it to them, and that was fine. We definitely need to do that. But I do think we should highlight the fact that we really need their help on those 4 things, and and I think the other 4 also that are most prone to, when this plan gets in play, if it's not fixed ahead of whatever the date we start with now, but ahead of changing into it, these are going to be the things that really local residents are going to be really unhappy about. Now, they might not have focused on it now and put back in consultation themselves, but when this starts to happen, the issues around the loss of trees, the issues around things coming up next door without getting any notification, the issues around the areas in Linden Park, McGill, Beulah Park, etc., that are in general neighbourhood, they are going to be the things that will be really, community will be very unhappy about. And so if we get ahead of the loop and have these MPs sort that out now, that would be fantastic. So that's what I feel we should do as a council. Again, I congratulate the administration on the work. It is massive. God knows what other councils have come up with in regard to their reviews of this code. But it's comprehensive. Absolutely happy to put council's name on it. I just think we should be proactive, a bit more. Let's put a bit more heat to the MPs, and let's see if they can't help us. I seek your support.
Councillor Lemon.
Yes, I'm happy to second this, but I would suggest a couple of inclusions, and that is under the getting the mayor to write. We've left off an MP, and that would be Stephen Marshall, who is Rose Park and Dulwich. So I would include Stephen Marshall in that. Because my understanding is he's already been threatened with not being re-elected should this go ahead. So this would in fact perhaps galvanise him a little more. And the other thing that I would actually say, in your part, under the yellow bit, part A, I'd actually say the proposed inclusion, because the way that's written, it's not clear whether you actually approve or don't approve. So the proposed inclusion. Yep. So having read this a couple of times over the last few days, I'd actually say that those 4 points are probably the main ones that we would want our politicians to be looking at. I will also add my thanks to administration. They've done a fine body of work in a very short period of time, and I actually think that the document we have before us is totally excellent. It is. I can't imagine another council having one as fine as this. This is brilliant work done in a very short period of time, and I thank you very much for it. I also want to extend my thanks to the flyer that's now going to go out to our residents. That was actually proposed last Saturday, and it's finished today and ready to go. And I am absolutely impressed at the quickness of that. It's going to get out to people, pardon me, well before the end, the 28th of February. So thank you very much for doing that. And I think it will galvanise people. After the Glenunga Hub consultation, one of the residents rang me today and said, I wanted council to write to me about this. Well, council now will be writing, and there will be something in their letterbox. So a lot of people don't know what's happening. It's been very quiet, and I think taking that proactive role is an excellent thing to do at this stage in the game. So I don't have much more to add. I think what we're doing is what we can do, and we're doing it very well. So thank you, everyone.
I'd like to even more commend the staff, because what we agreed to on Saturday was sending a letter to the people who own contributory items. Yesterday, only yesterday, during the meeting from 1 till 2 at the Regal, Chris made a declaration without actually letting the staff know that all residents and ratepayers in Burnside will receive a letter. And so Martin's team have put that together within less than 24 hours.
Fantastic.
So that is really a meritorious award in itself to get it something as ready as that. And it's a great document. It's clear, it's concise, it's visual. And the only thing it could have probably had was a picture of a multi-storey building that might have, next to a little house, that might have actually made it even more relevant. But I appreciate and thank you for all of your comments. But I just thought I'd let people know that it was even more urgently produced than that. Councillor Carbone.
Thank you, Worship. A question to the CEO, if I may. So I'm just thinking about a possible amendment, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on something first. Now, my understanding is that Minister Knoll is the only person to sign off on these changes.
Cabinet.
Is this going to Cabinet or not? And if it's not going to Cabinet, can we, in the wording of this, can we ask the Premier to force this motion or force these proposals to come back to Cabinet? Because I've got a sneaking suspicion that all these ministers will say, oh, well, it was approved under delegation and so forth. So is it going to come back to Cabinet or not? I suppose that's the question.
Through Madam Mayor, my thoughts on that question are that they've got a government process, and I don't think it really matters what we suggest to them in terms of how they process it. Sorry?
They'll do it their way.
Yes, and I'm not sure it'll be achieved by trying to force it to go to Cabinet.
It will force these members of Parliament to vote, because I don't want to cop out to say, oh, well, the Minister approved it under delegation and, you know, it's too late now. I want them to actually vote on this issue. So if it's not going to Cabinet, can we ask the Premier to bring it to Cabinet?
I guess normally when you pass a resolution, you vote on things you can control. This is a matter where I think we can't control that. And
But we can ask.
My advice would be is that I wouldn't advise council to resolve that way, because I don't think it's good for us to dictate to a higher level of government about how they should undertake their business. Council can choose to do that if they wish, but my advice would be not to pursue that line in your recommendation.
Are we allowed to individually write to members of Parliament asking this to go back to Cabinet before it's voted upon?
Through Madam Mayor, councillors in your own capacity, more than welcome to take that approach.
All right. Your Worship, I do have another question, if I can. Okay. Just regarding the letter that's going out, which is good, which is fine. Okay. But the one concern I still have, it still requires someone to sit down and write a letter and all that kind of stuff. You know. Could we, on top of that, have an online petition or survey where it takes literally 5 seconds for someone to click yes or no, and that way we can get thousands and thousands of views of residents, and they don't have to do anything. So in the same way, you know, Greenpeace do these sort of things all the time. You know, ban whaling and so forth. Yes or no, that's it. You know, can we do something like that and really promote it on social media and so forth?
Through you, Madam Mayor, and I'm reflecting, you raised this with me a few days ago, and I'm pleased to advise that Martin and the team have taken on board the challenge, and it won't be the form of a petition, but through the Facebook, we will be providing a facilitated approach to lodge online through the Facebook medium. And essentially it might be a couple of clicks, but we are going to make that step as easy as possible to send this letter, the submission off.
Under 30 seconds?
I don't know the final time frame, but it'll be as easy as we can set it up to be.
Well, they already made
All right.
And I guess as a broad,
They already made the comment on Saturday they couldn't do it.
as a broad comment,
So they don't have emails.
we're taking on the councillors' thoughts that we need to do everything we can in our power to make this as easy as possible for our residents to submit. So I'm not going to say we've left no stone unturned, but I think we've gone a long way to hitting all the avenues at this point in time, particularly with your Facebook idea. Thank you.
Councillor Dawes.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. In the flyer, as a question, we had 9 matters of importance, which Councillor Pickett's reduced to 4, although I have to say that B in the motion is fairly broad. I attended the meeting at Regal Theatre, and I know that one of the concerns there was the setbacks, the allotment sizes and so forth. Is B, this is a question to Wendy and Aaron, is B a bit too broad? Because we actually don't say in there what we are mainly concerned about.
Through the chair, could I just get some clarification? Are you referring to this?
No, I'm talking about what's up there on the screen. It's Councillor Pickett's motion, 4B.
Yeah, if I may, Madam Mayor, I think in light of the fact that it's going, this question, for example, this commentary is being posed to our 4 local members.
Yep.
I think it's appropriate to keep it worded this way, in that they'll also get accompanied with this the full submission. I think
so that
there's no need to get more prescriptive in this comment.
All right.
Because we are already forwarded in the whole document.
Because we have reduced 9 down to 4. They don't want something that someone thought was very important in one of our community meetings, thinking, oh, you haven't included it. So we will attach that particular flyer.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Henschke.
Yeah, quickly, wanting to add to that, I'm reading the submission and, and the major issue I'm reading here is character area overlays, and 10 years ago there was a lot of work done to propose other areas for inclusion, and that is a major issue as well, and demolition control is a major issue, etc. So I'm thinking it's like we're adding a word in here and seeking their proactive advocacy on the submission, and then ... on the following major issues, not including, for example, the following major issues or something like that, because I'm really worried that the 9 items clearly identified in here are not going to get advocated, as Councillor Dawes raised.
So if I can try and help with some words
Thank
there.
you.
And correct me if I've
yes,
got it
please,
wrong.
thank you for helping.
So it's something like, and seeking their proactive advocacy. The word I'm trying to insert here is based on the submission.
Yeah, on advocacy on our submission.
Let's try that on our submission, I guess, or on council's submission.
Is this an amendment?
It's
variation. Has to be an amendment. So unless it's an amendment,
no.
you shouldn't be part of it.
Sorry, if I can ask. Sorry, councillor. If you ask the permission of Councillor Piggott, whether he was comfortable inserting the words of clarity.
Oh, I see, thank you, yes.
You just seek
so
permission.
if I could seek
you just seek permission of Councillor Piggott.
Yep, I'd like to seek permission from Councillor Piggott to add a couple of words to clarify this and strengthen the motion.
The point of the exercise for mine is to actually really slim down. They are not going to go for all
I'll go. Jane,
Oh,
The purpose of this is the fact that, I don't know how many 100 items are in the submission. This brings it back to 9 key headlines, but I don't think it's realistic to have MPs go into bat on certainly all hundreds or even 9. Really, the purpose of this was to really say to someone like Vicky Chapman, if you do nothing else, we want you to do the lot. We do ask them to advocate on the lot, but if you do nothing else, fix those 4. And they're the 4 I chose. And I think when you do look at it, and the meetings that I've been to 2 of them, it does cover a fair bit of ground. And I think it's important that we do maintain it as a very targeted request of them to go into Stephen Cannell's office and say, look, these 4 do look like a problem for Burnside. So I'm keen to understand where you're coming from, but I really don't feel we should change the wording to broaden that again. I think it should stay as it is. So for that matter, I mean, obviously an amendment's possible, but I'm not in agreement with it.
Councillor Davey.
thanks, Your Worship. Yes, I thank Councillor Piggott for his motion and Councillor Lemon for seconding it. I'm happy with this format. I'd like to thank the staff for all of the work, because I know it's been a huge amount of work and effort right through this whole process, from at the grassroots, the organising the public meetings, which have been fantastic, all the explanatory work and the website, up to the executive and the CEO. I think it's been fantastic. I'd also like to thank my co-ward councillor, Councillor Hughes, for the work she's done in drawing up a leaflet for our ward when I wasn't well, and delivering that to our constituents, so that in Kensington Park ward they've had their own special highlight and leaflet to actually highlight to them what could happen in their area. And there's been a whole response to that, which has been quite heartening, and lots of responses directly into DIPD. So I hope everyone will support this. I think this is all we can do, and I think the comments about our MPs are that we can only do as much as we can do to inform them and hope that they will advocate as the motion intends. So I'll certainly be supporting this.
Councillor Hughes?
I will be supporting the motion as it stands. I think Councillor Piggott is correct in that we need to be concise and to the point, and I think sending members for Parliament a long list when we're also sending them a detailed submission won't draw the correct emphasis on really the key points that we want to get across. So I will be supporting this motion. I think one of the key things is also to thank the administration for their hard work. I've certainly become a lot more educated in the last few months, so thank you to all of you and for your quick responses and support, especially in providing or assisting in providing information for the flyer that went out in our ward. It was great to be able to just ask for some information and get it back so quickly, so thank you. I think the onus is actually on all of us though as well, as individuals. I know Councillor Carbone is going to be putting in his submission, which might be a slight variation, but I think we all need to get on board. And I think one of the points that was raised on the weekend at the community session was that we all, the volume of responses that come in will perhaps be helpful. So I will be supporting the motion as it stands.
Councillor Jones?
I agree with Councillor Hughes, but we've got a lot to do, so I move that the motion be put.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Carbone? Because unless you were seconding Councillor Henschke, because you were already on there to speak.
Oh.
So I'll accept Councillor Carbone as a seconder, and I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? I'm excited that it was unanimous. I did predict it on Saturday, so thank you all for your support. Carried. Sorry. Oh, now I've got to put the main motion. Oh. We've only halfway there. All right, I'll try again. Those who are in favour of the full motion that was produced by Councillor Piggott, those against, Agreed, and my comments stand. Okay, now we're going to move backwards into canopy plan. Thank you, Aaron and Wendy. Yeah, and I'm just concerned about the time and too much repetition. This is a great report, and I'm sure all of you are aware of it. But I'm looking at the time, and in 15 minutes, we're going to need to get an extension, and we still have several items and a confidential that we have to get through. So
I'm happy to move an extension until 11 o'clock.
all right.
Can we not do this at the next meeting? Can we not do what's left over on this at the next meeting and go straight to our confidential?
We still won't get that done.
Well, I think I think for the sake of those staff who've been here and waited all night for these items, it would be totally unfair to them for us to send them home now when they've waited all this time. So I'm going to know, so the motion is till 11 p.m. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Davey. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. All right, so we shall try to get through efficiently and quickly. So, a mover for this motion on the canopy plan, please. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Worship. I have an amended motion for this item. It should be up. And my amendment is that Council receive and note the progress report on the canopy action plan. 2, that an additional objective, tree planting, be added to the revised canopy action plan in the planning section with the instruction to be continue planting a minimum of 1,000 new trees throughout the city's verges, reserves and hills face, and that numbers of actual plantings achieved be provided to Council through the canopy action plan reports. 3, that the canopy action plan report be provided to Council every 6 months. And 4, that Council endorse the revised canopy action plan with priorities and proposed initiatives to address canopy loss and to inform the 2020-21 annual business plan and budget process with tree planting objectives added in this process.
Through a minute, Councillor Davey, if I may, it seems that the proposed motion that we had to put up is slightly different in point 2 to what you've read out. So I might just need you to read point 2 for me, please.
What have I missed out?
As you just notice on the screen.
Oh, it's that an additional objective of planting. Oh, sorry.
Just tell Rob it's the 7:05 email.
It's the 7:05 p.m. email. It's the second one.
Okay.
So sorry, it was.
Thank you for the clarification.
So sorry, I was reading intently. So yes, 1, that Council receive and note the progress report, and that 2, an additional objective, tree planting, delete off, be added to the revised canopy action plan in the planning section with the instruction to continue planting a minimum of 1,000 new trees throughout the city's verges, reserves and hills face, and that numbers of actual plantings achieved be provided to Council through the annual presentation, through the canopy action plan reports. Oh, well, that'll be fine, the annual presentations. And then 3, that the canopy action plan report be provided to Council every 6 months. Oh, God, he hasn't cut and pasted. Every 6 months. And that 4, that Council endorse the revised canopy action plan with priorities and proposed initiatives to address canopy loss and to inform the 2020-21 annual business plan and budget process with tree planting objectives added in this process. So I've moved this way in consultation with the staff and added these, the objective to the Canopy Action Plan at page 153, which has, as you'll note, the objectives of education, protection, planning and monitoring. And my motion is to add at planning another heading of tree planting. The aim being to reinforce what is actually a fantastic report, which outlines, as Ben Seamark and Barry Cant have outlined, a huge amount of work that's being done to preserve, maintain and promote our tree coverage right across the board in Burnside. From our interactive site to promotion of the urban forest to the educational materials for our community, I'm really pleased to see the new initiatives that they've included with a tree week and a school tree day for the school population. The one aspect that's missing that I'm constantly asked by the community, along with information about climate change, is how many trees are we planting? We don't have any data anywhere about how many trees we're actually planting and how many are surviving. So that's the reason for the inclusion of that, that new line in the Canopy Action Plan. The residents see the trees being, planted in our streets, our parks, our reserves, and on the Hills Face Zone with all that wonderful work that's being done. But they don't know how many and how many are surviving. So that's why I believe this needs to be included within the Canopy Action Plan, because the bottom line is replacing trees is the greatest objective, along with all this other work that we're doing to support and preserve and maintain it. I also think that we need a report every 6 months to keep track of all the progress and all the fantastic initiatives and targets, and so that we're able to relate this back to the community. So I won't labour the point any longer. I hope that gives you enough information for the rationale for that amendment to the recommendation. But it's a huge, massive body of work, and it's much appreciated. It's a lot of fantastic results. I hope you'll support it. Thanks.
Councillor Hugh.
Yes, I'd like to second this. And first, just a question. The addition to the recommendation with the extra trees, is that something that can be accommodated currently under budget allocations and whatnot?
Through your worship, that's approximately what we aim for each year annually anyway, so yes.
Great, just wanted to check that was all good. Look, I think this is wonderful. Thank you, Ben and Alan and team and others. There's one little rabbit hole I ended up going down reading this report, and there was talk of the tree day, which I thought was a great initiative. There was talk of a tree week. I thought this is even better. Then there was a tree festival. Very European, and I actually wanted to put my French pronunciation to the test. The Fondation Cartier pour the Contemporary Arts Museum. The trees exhibition in Paris, referenced in the report, looks like the sort of high-profile community-facing event that can get residents of Burnside jazzed up about trees, and it can draw people to us, and we can further showcase all the wonderful things we're doing. And it also helps us addressing that issue of losing urban canopy on private land, which is one of the biggest battles we're facing. So, good things.
Councillor Hughes.
I have, two questions. In terms of the 1,000 new trees that are listed there, is that replacement of trees that are removed because they're either damaged, died? So is that new, including replacement, or new, additional? Sorry.
Yep, through the Mayor, and Ben's testing me, so he's not going to say anything, he's letting me do it. It's a bit of that. So there is an element of replacement of trees that have been removed for various reasons. There are new trees going in spaces that have been created because of subdivision, new crossovers, that sort of stuff happening. The majority, though, are new trees going into vacant spots around the city that we've identified and are progressively filling up year on year.
Well, that was going to be my second question. It was mentioned in the report around that survey that's been done to identify additional locations for trees. I guess in terms of what are the potential numbers that we could ultimately plant if we took up the opportunity to plant trees in every vacancy? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'll take this through the chair. We've identified 5,000 vacant locations. So we have the potential of planting approximately around that, depending. We've got underground services and overhead power lines to consider, but essentially they're locations we can investigate for further tree planting.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Lemon?
I want to share my favourite bit in this in a minute, but the first thing I want to say is congratulations, Ben, on Tree City. I know that you would have been instrumental in that, and when that came through as an email, I got up and did a little jig of joy, I've got to say, so thank you for that. My favourite bit, draft tree planting master plan based on era heat mapping and verge impact study. Now, that is really deep thinking, and thanks again.
Councillor Hensch?
A couple of quick questions, thank you. If we had a pie chart, how much money are we spending on the trees, actually planting them and getting them in the ground, compared to all of the education events and all that sort of thing? So is it a 60-40 split or 60% trees in dollar value? And can you just give us a sense of that, please, the budgetary side?
Yeah, I think I like the question. I'm going to have to take it on notice.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
We need a bit of homework on that.
Yeah. Another quick question is education, big flavour in here. What about, I presume you're educating the developers, the construction industry, because, you know, when they build houses, sometimes they cut the street trees, they don't realise, all that sort of thing. So is it, we also targeting construction, architects, developers?
Yeah, through the chair, the education is aimed at residents, developers, all of those people you mentioned. So it's holistic and it's internal education, so departmental as well as external as well. So it's very, very important. Education is just part of that engagement with our community to get their support. There's other factors as well, but education is the first step towards that engagement process.
Right, thank you. Just a question, the word instruction in this motion, is that okay? I know we can't instruct the administration. Is that okay? In a motion? Fine, thank you.
Councillor Turn.
Thank you, Mayor. I haven't thanked anybody for a report tonight, so I'm thanking you. And very excited to see the celebrations, particularly for National Tree Day on August the 2nd and for the Tree Week and the Tree Festival. A couple of questions. Where will the 300 tube stock for the school children to plant, where will that be sourced from? Will that be from our own nursery?
Again, through the chair, yes, it will be. It will be grown locally at our biodiversity nursery, so sourced from local seed stock here.
Right. Another one is, will there be a budget for maintaining the trees? Because, you know, I banged on last year about 35% of the newly planted trees in Stonyfield died because we didn't start watering early enough. With climate change, we're getting hotter summers earlier. And so I just wondered if there'll be a special budget for that. How will that be accommodated to look after these trees? No point planting them if they're not maintained.
The number of trees that are being planted or are being looked at to be planted in the coming year can be dealt with within our current budgets. So our current systems, as they stand for watering of new trees, so that's at least watering them for at least 3 years.
Right.
I think we're sitting at about what we're up to now in terms of juveniles.
Planting across the city?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's 3,000 or 4,000 trees that we're currently watering in that program. We'll get another block of those that will drop off at the end of the 3 years. The situation that you're referring to, we have discussed with you and talked you through that, and it wasn't necessarily in relation to us not doing that work. We had some other administration issues, and I'm happy to talk to you about those.
Yeah, I'm not pointing the finger, but I'm just saying maybe if we start watering earlier, a month earlier than we have been, maybe you have it set in concrete that that's when you start watering, maybe that needs to be assessed. That's all, basically.
That's fine. That's through the Mayor, completely agree with you, and we'd look at that professionally through our own, through our own experiences, and we would adapt our programs to suit those conditions. And frankly, if that was needed, we'd take that as pressure as we move through the year. We wouldn't come back and ask for additional money. We would do it. Yeah.
Yes, and the voucher system that you are organising, which sounds really logical. So those people be educated. If they take them trees, they have to be educated in how to plant them and how to look after them. I presume that would be undergoing as well.
Yeah, through that process, we'll also be doing some education work. Part of that, for instance, will be a piece in the next edition of the Focus, which will include hints and tips on how to prepare and plant trees generally, not just those ones. And we would seek to provide that same material with those vouchers when they go out.
No, thank you.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the great report, and I apologise for this formal motion, that the motion be put.
Seconder, please. Councillor Jones. All those in favour? Against? Carried.
A really good question.
Motion is carried. Sorry. Oh, now we've got to put the motion down. We've got the formal motion. Sorry. Okay, second time I should have got it right. Okay, so now I'll put the formal motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Finish this. I would really like to take the opportunity to thank Alan, Ben, and Phil, and Mark, and everybody else connected with the Tree City of the World. As Mayor, I represent the whole community. This is, and I thank Councillor Lemmer for already thanking, but I want to take this opportunity to publicly acknowledge the work that you have done, continue to do, and are doing right now to ensure that this, first of all, that we were nominated, the work you did to that, and then also that we are continuing the work that provides us with that title. And so I really want to thank you all so much. And I might not see Ben again before he's off to London to present a paper at an international conference on urban forestry. And I wanted to wish him well on that, for that as well. So thank you. We are delighted to have people like you, and in particular you, on our staff and working for our community. So thank you. Okay, so item next, we're working backwards. We were going back to Regal. Next, 13.8 is next.
I hope the clerk comes up for this one too.
Sorry?
Happy to move
happy to
in
move?
accordance with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, happy to move the officer's recommendation. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lemon. Anyone wishes to speak on this? Councillor Davey? No, sorry, it's Councillor Henschke first.
Thank you, Mayor. So important to keep the crying room going. I used it many times with my children, and I think it'd be great to have partnerships with Child and Youth Health, raise awareness that it's a cinema that people can go to with their babies. Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a motion. Now what, 13.
Giving an amendment?
8, yes, thank you. I have an amendment to the motion. And Rob, you have the... that council approve the Regal Theatre Conservation Management Plan. And 2, that the lawn and garden area on the Regal site, located on the corner of May Terrace and Kensington Road, Kensington Park, be retained in full as community accessible open space as part of any future site alterations or future master plan proposal for the site. So I thank Michelle and all of the team for this, all the work that's been done on this, and for the conservation management plan. It's very timely to review the structural integrity of this building and assess all of the historic and heritage aspects, which are very important on this site. And as well as it does make recommendations to maintain and conserve the theatre and program the required works to enhance these and prolong the building's life. There will be an action plan developed to prioritise the works and the costings associated. And I know many of the locals are looking forward to replacement of the very ancient theatre seats, which are way past their use-by date. I think that tender has just recently gone out. Hopefully that will mean more clients and visitors to the theatre. Just in explaining why I've moved the second part of the motion, that little grassed area is really valuable community use area, and the building and area of the Regal that's leased to the Hula Hoop Wine Bar is operating very well. The garden's highly regarded and very well utilised, as probably many of you know at this time of the year. And the community are very keen to see that any future development of the May Terrace site does not affect this planted and maintained garden space. As I said, very well used by the business and the local community. The Conservation Management Plan recommends consideration of the development of a master plan for the site, and this is endorsed and will need to be developed by community consultation, given the constraints of this site and any impacts that any development might have on local residential and business community. So I won't add any more. I hope you will support just this little addition to ensuring that lawn and garden area is retained intact. I hope you'll support this. Thanks.
Is there a seconder for the amendment? If there's no seconder for the amendment, all right, Councillor Carbone, you wish to speak?
Oh. I was seconding. It's all right.
Councillor Hugel, you wish to second?
Carbone was on the first. I was on the button, he was on the hand, but he was first, so I'm happy to.
Julia was the seconder on here.
No, no need to speak.
Okay, you do wish to speak. Right. Councillor Piggott, you wish to speak?
Hey, look, I'd speak against the amendment. Look, I think it's, eventually we do need to do a master plan for the site, and we need to fix everything up there. And I'm keen that happens sooner rather than later. It's not part of tonight's debate necessarily. I don't mind the sentiment about I have spent some time in that open space myself, I must concede. But I just don't think we should tie our hands before getting, more comprehensive review of the site. So from that point of view, I feel it's not appropriate to take it off the table. What I'd like to do when we eventually get to it is have a comprehensive review of what's possible on the site, and with all things considered, and then the decision be made at that time. So I don't feel the amendment's appropriate.
Councillor Lemon?
Yes, I have a question. Given this amendment, which seems to tie us up into open space, I would draw members' attention to page 138, where you've got some proposals in terms of an outdoor cinema and a green room and other options. In that the green area is still mostly there, but there are some options here. And what I'm asking is, will this motion preclude any of this?
Through the chair, the motion as it stands at the moment talks about retaining the area in full. So my understanding is that some of those examples have a slightly amended garden area and it would preclude those.
Thank you. I'll speak to the motion now, if I may. I'm afraid I can't support this either. I understand the sentiment. I understand the wanting to keep the green space, but I'm with Councillor Piggott. I don't really want us to tie our hands to possibilities, and this is a debate that we need to have at a later stage when we get a master plan, rather than tie ourselves up and not have an open cinema there, or not have a little bit of green space missing, or not, you know, put in a wading pool if we want to. I just think that we need to keep it open. So for that reason, I won't be supporting this particular amendment.
Councillor, sorry about that. Councillor Hughes.
Similarly to Councillor Lemon and Councillor Piggott, while I appreciate the sentiment, and it obviously is within my ward, and there are lots of people that see the value that that area adds to our local community, I think it would be slightly premature at this stage without going and looking at all of our options before making an assessment. I think section 27 of the report talks around, there are some recommendations, however, the administration have said there would be significant community engagement and inputs throughout the next step. So I believe when we do get to the point of taking those next steps, which would be great to see how we can activate that space, and it certainly was it was really great to see the things like the Christmas carols that were held there, and to see how the community engaged in that space. And I think there's a really great opportunity. I think we all see the value that that land adds, and I think people would obviously want to see the open space and the greenery retained. I don't necessarily think that's up for debate tonight. I think we should move with the officer's recommendation, and then once we've had all of the options put out on the table at a later date, come back and pick the best option for the site then.
I'm just going to remind everyone that we have a meeting that finishes at 11. We have a confidential item that needs to be discussed and determined tonight. And I've already determined we're going to leave 13.6 and 13.7 until the next council meeting. I just want to remind people to try to bring this to a resolution. Otherwise, we've never had to stop a debate and carry it on for the next meeting, but it is really important that we get to the final item. Okay, so Councillor Carbone.
Your Worship, given what you just said, I'll be very brief. It's a super quick question. It is a little bit controversial. I'll direct it to you and you can do what you like. But just given that we're talking about heritage and conservation and so forth, and maybe moving forward in terms of brand awareness and all that kind of stuff, I'm just wondering if there's been any thought, even for a split second, about changing the name back to the Chelsea Cinema.
It's not
Not part of discussion for tonight.
All right.
Happy to discuss it with you another time. Councillor Hubel?
I have to, with great respect, disagree with Councillors Piggott, Lemon and Hughes. I completely understand and am sympathetic with the sentiment there. I, on the other hand, support this motion with the addition. I don't have a problem tying our hands in terms of securing community open space. I think things would have to be fairly major in terms of deciding that we want to get rid of open community space, in which case we can revisit this if necessary. So I support the motion.
Right. Councillor
I don't think we should rush this debate. I'd like to add something, but we haven't got time, so I move that we defer this motion until the next meeting.
So we should move to
adjourn the motion.
Till our next meeting.
Yes.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Davey, you're supporting that? So All right, can I have a motion, move into confidence, please? Councillor Cornish, you're always good at those. Seconded, please, Councillor Piggott, thank you. All those in favour? Against? Carried? Thank you.